Manisha madam, it is live now.
Yes, ma'am. Namaste. I'm wishing everyone a beautiful morning. I, Manisha Tyagi, faculty of Bombay Teachers Training College, delighted to welcome all our guests, resource persons, and participants to day 3 online workshop series on social emotional learning by Samantha Foundation India in association with KC College, Bombay Teachers Training College, and Atman Academy. Prayer is essential and the world's greatest wireless connection. So let's connect and pray together for peace and harmony. I request our very young and talented students of Atman Academy, Swara and Aditya, to say prayer. Swara and Aditya.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, can I start?
Yes, Vita, start.
Swara, yes, Swara will start and then you can go for Guru Brahma. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
वक्रतुण्ड महाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभ निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा
Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Gurudevo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Thank you, Swara and Aditya, for wonderful prayer. Now I request technical team to play Bombay Teachers Training College prayer.
ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ अस्तो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Thank you. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Now let us all rise and pay tribute to our national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंग विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंग तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Wow, so it gives a lot of energy to all of us. Before we begin with this session, let me brief you about the previous session, the day 2 that happened yesterday. It was conducted by 3 experts and they all shared and discussed various examples from their life and also provided some wonderful tips which teachers should apply in their daily life. First technical session was conducted by Ms. Manjushri Patil ma'am, founder director of Atman Academy, and she spoke on the topic deep diving into the self. Through her session, Ms. Manjushri Patil made us realize that most of the professions are stereotyped, which have to be removed from the minds of the children. Session was moderated by Dr. Raju Talreja. Dr. Meenakshi Lat moderated the technical session too, where Dr. Swati Popat ma'am spoke on the topic, a teacher's contribution to a social emotional learning in classroom. She explained about the development of the brain in the early childhood stage and also recommended a few books to read and gave a very important message to the teachers, that is, practice what you preach. In the technical session 3, Ms. Manjushri Patil ma'am had interaction with Mrs. Sonali Kulkarni, a well-known actress, where she shared her personal views about emotional learning. All the sessions were highly appreciated by all the participants. Now, today's segment is based on understanding emotional intelligence. And we have with us a very dynamic and multi-talented resource person, Ms. Amber Paulson. Welcome, ma'am. And we are so happy to have you with us this morning. It's my privilege to introduce Ms. Amber Paulson. Ms. Amber Paulson, Director of Education, Think Equal, USA. Ms. Amber has been working in education settings both internationally and in the USA for over 10 years. After teaching primary school in the United States for several years, ma'am achieved an MA in Education and International Development from the Institute of Education at University College London. Following this, she joined the Think Equal team as the program's vision and mission statement are well aligned with her past experience and future goals. She has trained in multiple social emotional learning techniques and holds a multiple subject teaching credential, which includes cross-cultural language and academic development authorization. As Think Equal's Director of Education, Ms. Amber has gained curricular and pedagogical developments, including the expansion of the program's age reach, development of teachers training content, alignment of Think Equal's core content with international curricula. Ma'am, we are very fortunate to have you with us, and thank you so much for giving your valuable time. And now I hand over the session to you, ma'am, Amber Paulson.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a wonderful opportunity, a 6-day seminar on something that we're all so passionate about. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm not sure, it's not working. Does anybody have any tips?
Yeah. Are you co-host?
I have it. There we go. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yes, it's here. There you are.
Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes,
ma'am. You can
perfect.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the session on emotional intelligence. I understand that we've been speaking pretty specifically about social emotional learning for the past few days, but this is really one of the core elements and why we're all here today. As I was just given a beautiful introduction. My name is Amber Paulson. I am the Director of Education at Think Equal in the United States. It's a bit dark in my house because it is 8:30 p.m. by us, so my apologies for that. So ultimately, welcome to day 3. I wanted to just kind of start out by understanding, obviously I haven't been a part of the interactions up until now, and just in the chat I was hoping perhaps people could throw out ideas of what has caught your interest thus far, anything that has sparked questions or wonder in any of our participants. So if anybody would like to just kind of put that in the chat group, that would be fantastic. No? Well, we can move on to the second question then. Just curious, how comfortable are our participants with emotional intelligence? This is a new topic that's been emerging over the past several years. I see 4, good. We have some people who feel very, very comfortable with this idea. So if you can choose an emoji, I know I couldn't figure out how to do that, but or type a number 1 to 5, depending on your comfort level. I see we have some people who are feeling pretty confident, which is fantastic because we're just going to build off of that from here. Oh, and there's this little happy face.
People are typing 4.
Yes, I didn't know. This is my first big Zoom presentation. So we can do emojis or 1 to 4. And I see a lot of happy faces. I see the number 5. I see the numbers 4. So it seems like we have a really solid understanding already on emotional intelligence that we can build upon today. So to begin the conversation, I wanted to bring up IQ. IQ is something that I think we all know a lot about. And I was just curious to see how many people may have had this experience. Have you ever taken an IQ test? If you have, just turn your camera on and off again so we can see how many people may have actually investigated IQ, might know what it is. I see some turning on and off, wonderful. I've only taken one on the internet, never an established one, so that's good to see. Yeah, great, and I see that we're hoping for practical interventions during this session for EQ, which we will definitely explore a little bit later. Some people have never had an IQ test. This is perfectly fine. So to begin the conversation, an IQ, obviously, as many of us know, is intelligence quotient. The intelligence quotient is a measure of someone's reasoning ability, and it's often directly connected to academic ability, success in school, success in university, and eventually success in the workplace. An IQ test will measure how well you can use information or logic to answer questions, measures your memory, short and long term, and measures how well people can solve puzzles and recall information, how quickly you can do that. And generally, in the sphere of this conversation, people do feel as if IQs can be raised. So can IQ be raised? The answer, according to a lot of universities, including Harvard University, is yes. Little things you can do to help raise your IQ, memory activities, executive control activities, games, things like that. Visual, spatial, reasoning activities, so mazes where your brain really has to focus on what's in front of you. Playing new instruments, learning new languages, reading, and continued education. And the idea is that yes, even if you are born genetically with not the highest IQ, or you don't have the resources as you're growing up, you can grow this as you grow older, which is wonderful. That brings me to the next thought, which is EQ. And I'm curious if we have the same number of people turning their cameras on and off. I see some already. Have you had an EQ test? I'll just wait for a moment. Yes, great. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, something that's become much more prevalent in the past decades, especially related to learning and early years learning, which we will explore as we move on. But essentially, for anybody who's not familiar with this term, the EQ is the other side of the IQ. So it's your emotional quotient. It's not testing your reasoning abilities. It's not testing your intelligence level. It's more about how you interact with others. So specifically, it's a measure of your emotional abilities. How well can you monitor your own emotions and the emotions of others? Can you read someone's face or someone's body language and react appropriately when you can see that they are upset, frustrated, sad? It measures your ability to distinguish between and label emotions. And it measures your ability to use emotional information to kind of guide your actions. And I'm seeing, yes, this is incredibly important. And that brings me to the next slide. Can EQ be raised? We just discussed that many different universities and studies have agreed, yes, you can raise your IQ. EQ is much trickier, according to the most recent research, especially an article from the Harvard Business Review. And if anybody is interested in the articles or the studies that I mention during this presentation, please do let me know, and we'll make sure to share those with you, because these have all come from kind of reputable sources that I'd love to share. But essentially, EQ can be raised as an adult predominantly through coaching programs. So I see that, Priyanka, we'll get that to you. Coaching programs, it's a toss-up. They work for some people and they don't for others. Some people are naturally emotionally inclined, and that's quite lucky, but not many people are. It can be quite difficult, especially as an adult to navigate emotions and feelings and understand how to interact with others based on that. So essentially, EQ and IQ, they're intricately connected in terms of success. If you have a high level of EQ and a high level of IQ, you tend to be quite successful in what you set out to achieve. However, researchers, educationalists, neuroscientists are realizing that EQ is more important than we originally thought. IQ was the focus for many, many, many years. EQ is becoming equally, if not more important at this point in time. So that brings me to the topic of our presentation. EQ, your emotional quotient, is directly connected to EI, which is emotional intelligence. They are almost used synonymously, meaning people use the terms as the same, right? But essentially, emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express your emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships with justice and empathy. One of the main thinkers in this is a gentleman named Daniel Goldman from Harvard University. And EI, emotional intelligence, covers these 5 graphics as a whole. This is obviously not all that it covers, but this is a graphic that's allowing us to understand a little bit more about what this entails. So emotional intelligence includes the ability to be self-aware, the ability to be empathetic, motivated, the ability to regulate your own emotions and your reactions to larger emotions that might kind of take over your body. It's a bit more tricky when you're having feelings inside that are related to an emotion. And social skills. And yeah, I see that Sandeep has asked, can we say emotional management? I think yes. These are all related terms. They're all in the same sphere. EQ is the kind of the more academic term for it. It's measuring your EI or your ability to manage, but regulating emotions as well. It all comes into play here. So a question is, why is emotional intelligence important? And I've done a bit of research in this area. Ultimately, it's these 2 points. And this is all based on adult life, adult existence. And we'll go into the early years in the classroom in just a few moments. But in terms of emotional intelligence and adult success, a high EQ generally means someone is more intrinsically motivated. And I think as teachers, many of us understand what that means. You're working towards something because of what you feel inside, as opposed to an external reward, which would be money, respect, fame, something like that. You're motivated as a person to do good, to be kind, to be compassionate. And that is what we try to foster in our students throughout their entire time in school. We do tend to give them rewards when necessary, of course, but the intrinsic motivation is what helps individuals succeed in the workplace and in their own relationships. Additionally, emotional intelligence is related to productivity and overall mental well-being. And in the workplace, I think we all know, especially this year, that productivity is it's monumental. It's something that we all value within ourselves, and obviously employers and people we're working with appreciate productivity. But the second part here is important as well. Overall mental well-being. Overall mental well-being. That means that you're feeling good about yourself. And when you're challenged with something in the workplace or with a student who's having a hard time or with a family event, you can navigate that because your emotional intelligence is so high that you're able to just feel good and navigate things in a healthy way, even if they're not the most positive situations. So emotional intelligence leads to more meaningful connections with others and leads to a boost in performance at work improved communication skills, and resilience when facing a challenge. So ultimately, a high level of emotional intelligence positively affects many aspects of life. So the next question is, how does this transfer to education? And I did a bit of internet research trying to find specific correlations between emotional intelligence and the early years, but there's not much about that. I will go into the research that supports EI in the early years in just a few slides, but this one I thought was quite effective. This was a study done in 2010, so it's still quite old, but they found that emotional intelligence positively affected college students' academic performance and social interactions. And they found that these two elements were closely intertwined, which I mentioned a bit earlier. You can't necessarily separate EQ and IQ. You can't separate emotional well-being and academic well-being. They go together. If you're having a bad day or you had a fight with a sibling and you go to write a paper or take a test, you're going to be affected by that. So the ability to regulate those emotions will affect your academic achievement as well. Ultimately, and I'll just read this quote off, EQ or EI is a significant factor in the quality of social interactions with peers, while IQ does not seem to have much of a role in a college student's social life. So EQ is the social aspect, IQ is the academic aspect, and having a high level of both is generally a positive factor in future successes. Now, the reason we're all here, how can this transfer to the early years classrooms? The answer to that is social emotional learning. I think many of us will already be aware of what social emotional learning is. It's often the acronym SEL is used, but I have a video to share. And if the sound doesn't work, let me know. It should work. But this is a video from Castle, which is one of the most revered kind of social emotional learning organizations in the academic world, at least here in the USA. So hopefully it'll give a bit more insight in a more eloquent way than I can.
Social emotional learning is essential.
It's the tools that kids need to be resilient, to be problem solvers, to be good people.
SEL is really about the holistic development of young people.
SEL is trying to bring a balance to the individual and what are the personal competencies you need to develop to be successful. How do you pull them all together so that kids can relate and navigate the world more effectively?
The myth was that knowledge was information that could be bolted onto a brain like any other kind of mechanical part. The truth is knowledge is constructive. The truth is all learning is relational. The truth is that emotion drives attention and attention drives learning.
Social and emotional learning is about how you do school. It's about what the student experiences, what the student learns, how teachers teach.
We can think about schools and classrooms, out of school time spaces, families, etc., as places where there's an exchange of knowledge about the world, knowledge about yourself, and knowledge about the other persons that you're interacting with. All of those kinds of experiences, I think, help form and expose and shape the ways in which young people understand themselves and other people.
And we start talking about the whole child. Does your child understand self-awareness? Do they understand social awareness? They make good decisions. Are they responsible? And then we start talking about what that applies to academics and looking at all the essential skills we need them to be successful in life.
Children learn when their heart is open, engaged, connected, and filled with purpose.
Learning is magical, and through SEL, we can create conditions that allow all kids to access that magic.
So essentially what that video is saying in a more eloquent way is what we've just covered. EQ and IQ are hand in hand. learning is constructive, and all areas of learning are connected. And I think, as we know as educators, when you approach mathematics and reading and science all together in one sort of project, children learn better. When you include social emotional aspects there as well, perhaps you have a morning meeting where you discuss feelings, or you ensure that you have conferences with children after they've had a conflict on the yard. This is all related, and it is all affecting academic success and overall well-being of students and teachers. So just to summarize that, social emotional learning is this nice long quote: the process through which all young people acquire and apply knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, achieve personal, collective goals, feel and show empathy for others. That's a big one here, empathy. Establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. This is most effective when taught in the early years, which connects back to the question about EQ and whether or not EQ can be raised. It's quite tricky, which is why we're here and we're pushing to get this in schools as early as possible. So to elaborate on that fact, this is a graph put out by Harvard University's Center on the Developing Child, and it outlines what we're saying quite clearly. You'll notice the blue line, the one that goes downward, is the brain's ability to change in response to experiences. So when children are very, very young, up to the age of 4, the brain can adapt quite easily, and you see that line goes down. So you have the ages here at the bottom, and up on the y-axis, you have just the level of ability. So at the age from 2 to 10, the brain's ability in response to experiences is quite fluid. Here in your your orange line, that reflects the amount of effort your brain has to put forward when experiencing something new. And you see that in the early years, again, until maybe about 20 almost, the brain can change quite well. But after you hit 20 and go upward, the brain has a harder time adapting to new experiences and new concepts. So what I think is really important here is this section between the ages of 2 to 10. The brain is most malleable and the brain is most reactive. So this is just a bit more. We're going to focus for the next few slides on brain development and the science behind it. I am not a neuroscientist. It's taken me a little bit of time to understand this. So if it seems as a bit confusing, I'm happy to share these resources again, but this is really nice to know and understand. And this is a video put out by Harvard University again. It's the first video in a series of 3, and I do have the other 2 listed should anybody be interested. But this is essentially explaining how brains develop in the early years and why the early years are crucial times to ensure that we're helping children build neural pathways for social and emotional intelligence.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
So the gentleman narrating there, he speaks quite quickly and he uses words that I had to look up sometimes. But essentially what they're explaining is that in our brains are neural pathways. And the neural pathways are easiest to kind of form in the early years. Once you hit a certain age, those neural pathways begin to deteriorate if they're not used. So if you're not practicing empathy, if you're not practicing emotional intelligence, if you're not practicing point of view or perspective taking, those neural pathways will start to deteriorate. If you are practicing these, as an adult also, but especially in the early years, the children's neural pathways become stronger and stronger and stronger. And if you saw in the video, they mentioned that emotional control is formative in the early years. This is a graphic that hopefully explains it just a little bit more. Ultimately, this is the brain architecture in the first years of life. You see the first rectangle is a visual graphic of the neural pathways at birth. Not very many, still just an infant. This is a child that's just come into the world. At age 6, this is a graphic of all those neural pathways that are forming and moving. The brain between birth and age 6 is so active and so powerful. By the age of 14, you'll notice that the neural pathways have lessened. And a recent study actually suggests that by the age of 13, many children have their neural pathways are set, and it's quite difficult to move past. Obviously, there are always opportunities to grow, and it would be very sad if not, but growth mindset, we can always change, we can always get better, we can always improve. But in terms of science and the brain, this is the most current research. So how does this connect back to social emotional learning, and how do you put it in your classroom? Over the past 50 years, there have been many studies that suggest the positive results of social emotional learning in the early years. The early years I'm speaking about specifically for Think Equal and Samantha, between the ages of 0 and 6. 3 and 6 is where we focus, but infancy is equally important here. But ultimately, some of the most prominent studies have shown that adults who are exposed to social emotional learning in the early years had higher earnings, committed fewer crimes, were more likely to hold a job and graduate from high school. So these were obviously long-term and lifetime effects from exposure to social emotional content in the early years. Equally, and on the economic side, which is quite attractive to some people, it provides a $17 US dollars, a $17 return to the community for each dollar invested. So the more money a community puts into social emotional learning in the early years, the more money comes back to them in the end, because they're not necessarily paying for welfare or paying unemployment rates, things like that. Another study has shown that as they got older, children who were exposed to social emotional learning in the early years had improved academics, which we've kind of already discussed, just not necessarily backed by research. They had higher productivity, related directly back to that EQ, and lower social costs. That connects back to the point above. And then, of course, academic performance was increased between 11 and 17%, which seems like a small number, but it's actually quite significant. And any academic improvement, and most of these studies were done in areas where students were at risk, potentially coming from lower income households with fewer resources. So any improvement is a positive here. But I don't think I have to convince anyone here that social emotional learning in the early years is important. However, it is nice to know that we're on the right track, especially when it comes to research and science. So here's the ultimate question. How can this be brought into the classroom? As many may know, governments across the world have begun to realize the importance of a high emotional intelligence and EQ. And they've begun to integrate social emotional learning strategies into national curriculum frameworks. I'm not entirely sure how it is in the Indian context, but I can tell you, I was a teacher, as mentioned earlier, in the US for several years, and the government, yes, they agreed that this was necessary, this had to be done, but they didn't provide tools. They simply provided outcomes. And it was up to the teacher to develop a whole new set of lessons, a whole new set of curriculum in order to reach these goals. Teachers, especially this year, are overworked. Consistently creating new content, consistently battling, putting out fires on a daily basis. So it's quite a burden for a government to simply say, yes, social emotional learning is important. Yes, emotional intelligence is important. Now do it. And it leaves people, especially those without experience in this content area, excuse me, previously, a little bit, floundering in a way. So this is where we can bring Samantha and Think Equal in. Samantha, and I'm not entirely sure how much you've discussed this already, and my apologies if you have, and I do know that this will be further discussed tomorrow, but I did want to just provide an intro to tangible tools to bring into your classroom that will help you implement social emotional learning with children aged 3 to 6. So essentially, Samantha is that tangible tool for teaching social emotional learning. The program has developed lesson plans, books, and resources. As the Director of Education, I've been very much involved with every element of this, as well as Leslie Udwin, whom I believe we all met yesterday. But ultimately, the goal here was to bridge that gap between governments and researchers saying, this is what you need, and teachers actually being able to do it without being too overwhelmed. So we've created lesson plans. The lesson plans are highly interactive. The lesson plans are highly constructive. The lesson plans are based in Vygotsky's element of social cognition. So they include conversations, sharing personal experiences, relating to one another, taking points of view. We encourage children to role play, because children do learn best through play, and games, and songs. I didn't add songs, but music is up there as well. Within the program, we've also developed our own books. These books are commissioned through the organization, and they're at the core of the program. Ultimately, we view narrative as the ideal vehicle for children to learn and share personal, social, and emotional learning. They live the story. And I think as teachers, we all have seen the wonder in their eyes when you read a story to them, the ask for you to read it over and over again. Stories are everything, not only to us as adults, but to children especially. So the books within the program are commissioned by us. So we have a complete control over what topics each book is addressing. The tangible tools also include resources that you can show and use with children. So nothing needs to be created by a teacher here. This is, and obviously you can take it where you'd like to go, but this is a concrete kit to implement social emotional learning in your own classrooms. Just to kind of elaborate a bit on the books, they're commissioned and created by the team. We have complete oversight into the content, and it ensures that the focus of social emotional learning is everywhere, all the time. I've just put a few pictures of some of my favorite books because I like talking about them, but just to give you an understanding of how this goes together and how this links back to emotional intelligence and building upon that foundation. So for example, this first book, Anjali's Kite, focuses specifically on sharing and conflict resolution among children, which is something that we as adults struggle with sometimes, and children are definitely learning how to resolve conflicts peacefully and internalizing that and taking it forward. So Anjali's Kite is a story about a little girl who needs to learn how to share something, but also how to take ownership of her own materials and her own belongings. It's a really nice, beautiful story. And after that come several lessons and several activities in which the children engage and live through the story on their own. The second book pictured here is called Is There Anyone Like Me? This is a story about an African animal called an okapi, and he's different. No other animal looks like him, no other animal talks like him, no other animal walks like him, and through the story, he experiences that journey of self-discovery and self-acceptance and realizing that yes, actually, you're unique, you're special, and this is good. And everybody's unique and special, and this is good. This next book is called Helping Hands, and it's just that. It's a book about children helping their community. It gives concrete examples of how to help those in need, how to help those not in need, how to simply be a caring member of your community. And again, the activities build on that and bring in conversations about community members, people who may be serving the community in a less visible sort of way. So we discuss those people who take out the trash, perhaps, that children don't necessarily see on a daily basis, but they're there and they're helping, and without them, the community would not be as successful. And this final book is called I Love My Planet. This is a book about environment, about the earth, about caring, about recycling, about everything that children can do to ensure they're taking care of the earth, their home, because that is a core element of social emotional learning as well. Caring for your planet, having empathy for the world in which we live. These are only 4 examples of books. We've created, at least 80 at this point. So it goes on for levels and levels to develop with the children's ages. But those are a few examples of the content and the social emotional curricula that is attached to the program. The Think Equal Samantha program includes specific tools, and I will go into this a bit more, so I know that some people were asking for concrete activities to do in the classroom. And again, you'll learn more about that tomorrow. But specifically, mindfulness activities are included. From the photos here, you can see the first one, the children are doing something called belly breathing. This draws attention to the breath. They lay on their backs, they put something a bit heavy on their tummies, and they breathe. And they feel it. And this allows children a tangible way to monitor their breath, to connect with their bodies, and just understand that they are connected. They are their own being, and they are in charge of how they breathe, how they react, and how their bodies feel most of the time. The second photograph for our mindfulness activities are the heart and star wands, and these are specific tools for problem solving. So mindfulness isn't only about the body and the self, it's mindfulness of others as well. So for these 2 little wands the children hold, they will interact with each other in an almost a scripted way in the beginning to help them navigate their problems. So the person with the star might say, I felt this way when you did that. And the person with the heart one will respond and repeat what they say. So they're practicing speaking sentences of empathy and practicing listening to sentences of empathy and understanding. And those are just two examples. Again, more light will be shed on these in the upcoming days. I just wanted to give you a little snapshot. Excuse me. And then we also include tools for emotional regulation. We've developed our own in certain areas, and you will be shown those later on. But this specifically, the images I have here, is something out of Yale University called the Ruler Program. And the Ruler Program, I'll go into it a bit more in the next ones. The Ruler Program is very much about recognizing your emotions, understanding your emotions, labeling your emotions, expressing them, and regulating them. So at the very, very young ages, it's all about identifying emotions. What are emotions? How do you feel? Happy, sad, frustrated, and you explore these. And as the program develops, we learn strategies. This is a specific tool called the mood meter, which I'm going to go into a bit more depth on now. So as I mentioned, the Ruler Program, it's integrated into the program. We've partnered with Yale University, and they've given us the content, and we've adapted it to fit the needs of children learning the Think Equal and Samantha programs. But essentially, as I just mentioned, it's an acronym, R-U-L-E-R. The R is for recognizing emotions in both yourself and others. The U, understanding the causes and consequences of emotions. So understanding why you feel that way, but also understanding what that feeling, that emotion might incur, what might happen. The L is for labeling your emotions. If you can't say how you're feeling, there's not much that can be done. So this is something we really focus on with children. The E is expressing your emotions. I'm sure we've all had that experience with a child who was feeling a certain way, but didn't know how to show it. This approach is intended to help them express it in a way where others will understand. And the R, the final R, is for regulating. So when you have those very, very large feelings, when you're furious, even when you're just excited, how do you regulate that to ensure that you are not reacting in a way that can hurt others or hinder your own ability to focus in the classroom or maintain your friendships? This is just another quick video from Yale on the Ruler Program. It'll shed a bit more light here, and it will also give you a little bit more information from the academics who created it.
The mood meter is fantastic. It gives the child the opportunity to show their feelings.
Preschool Ruler was developed at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. We partnered with Child Care Learning Centers in Stamford, Connecticut to develop a way to teach emotional intelligence to our youngest learners. Right from the beginning of the day, the teacher has a good idea of where each child is coming into their classroom. They decide how they're feeling, which quadrant of the mood meter, whether they're angry, happy, sad, or calm, and they put their picture down there. So they're recognizing their emotions, they're able to label it.
When children come into school or during the day and they are either anxious or angry, it will affect the way that they are learning in the classroom because they're not paying attention and they're not listening, and it makes the learning very difficult for them.
The Ruler Program provides a fundamental tool set for the children to be ready to learn. It allows them to recognize, to understand, to label, to then express, and ultimately to regulate their emotions and their feelings.
Why do you feel sad? You miss mommy.
The teachers then recognize that the children are coming into their classroom with a myriad of different feelings every day, and it's helping the children realize that I'm not always going to come to school happy.
They learning new vocabulary like excited, curious. It's not only using happy.
I'm hearing a lot of more communication, not just taking the toy, but can I play too?
A lot less of the aggressiveness, a lot less hitting, a lot less pushing. We've noticed they're really much more verbal about their emotions and the way that they're feeling.
No, that's not what it is because I miss my dad.
I think it is increasing their empathy, which is a high level skill for a 3 and 4 year old.
So it's not just helping one particular child who is having the behavior, it's helping the other children.
And it's helped them to sit and focus and to learn the other parts of the curriculum.
And when they can manage their feelings, they are ready for learning.
Integrating early was easy. As a teacher, they're just doing it and it's fun to do.
It's hard enough to start communications with your children and have them being comfortable with talking to you about their feelings. So you're introducing your child to something that they're natural with, is colors.
Ruler, I think, not only is helping children's life, it's helping our feeling to regulate our emotions.
I've started to use the mood meter myself at home with her because, that's our way of communicating.
It's really a tool that they could use forever, and it sets them up for success. And in an increasingly competitive world, these children need all of the advantages that they can possibly summon.
We can't always choose the feelings that we have, but we can choose how we respond to our feelings. And we can teach children how to do the same.
So I do love that last line, and that was a woman named Shauna Tomini, who's actually had a hand in some of our lesson plans. She's quite a close colleague of ours, but how she says we can't always control the emotions that we have, but we can control how we react to them or how we express them. And that's true of children and adults. And you heard one of the teachers there saying she's using this at home and she's using it with her adult friends. I have one in my home to ensure that we can make sure we're consistently communicating within my family how we're feeling. So oh, if she's feeling angry, maybe I need to step back for a minute. So I'm going to go into exactly what that tool is, the mood meter, in just a moment. But that video just kind of gives an overview of the program and connects back to those neural pathways. These children are doing this in their earliest years because they need to start the neural pathways in their brains so that they have the ability to do this as they grow older, and it is natural, not something that they're really having to focus on. So this is the mood meter. Oh, and I see, yes, I see some other people also have them for themselves as adults. That's great. It is really helpful to have mood trackers. This one specifically is a bit complex, and we don't necessarily go into the complexities with the youngest children, the 3-year-olds, but as the levels progress and the children get older, we do expand and include all of this. So ultimately, you'll see this square here with 4 different colors: red, yellow, green, and blue. On the axes, the line on the side and the line on the bottom, you have levels of energy and levels of pleasantness. So ultimately, up here in the red, this is high energy feelings with a lower level of pleasantness. And we don't use the term good or bad when speaking about emotions, because no emotions are bad. All emotions are regular. Some emotions are less pleasant than others. Some emotions we don't really like to have, but we do. And that's a fact of life. So here you have high energy is angry, scared, frustrated, when you're clenching perhaps, and you can feel, and we teach this to the children, you can feel the energy flowing through your body sometimes when you're feeling these. The same with the yellow quadrant, high energy, you can feel it, but it's also high in pleasantness. This is happy, excited, curious, things like that. As we go down a bit further, we have the blue quadrant. This one is low in energy, but also low in pleasantness. This is ultimately when you're feeling sad, when you're feeling just, and again, your body reflects the energy levels. You slump over if you're feeling a bit disappointed or a bit lonely. And the green quadrant is the best quadrant for learning, really. It's when you're high in pleasantness, but low in energy. You're relaxed, you're calm, you're feeling good. When we teach this to young children, we don't necessarily teach all of these terms for the emotions at one time. It's easiest to begin with these bigger words: angry, happy, calm, sad. You start with those foundational feelings, those foundational emotions. And as the children become more comfortable discussing emotions and discussing their feelings, you can build the vocabulary there. And this is great for the word wall. This is great for connecting home with parents, things like that. And then we have had a lot of parents who've learned the program and have implemented these at home as well. So it's in the classroom and it's at home. The way that this works is that teachers are encouraged to put a large version of this on the wall of the classroom where the children can reach it. You can have Velcro on it, you can use sticky tack, but each child has either a picture or a name tag or something that represents themselves. They can draw themselves even. And when they come into the classroom, they simply put their image in the quadrant what they're feeling. So maybe they had a bad morning, maybe they didn't have the breakfast they wanted, and they come in the red and they put their image there. And then you as the teacher know, okay, we're gonna have to start from square one with the student and make sure that they're comfortable. So it's a tool for teachers as well as it is for children. I've said it before, I'll say it again, all emotions are natural and all emotions can be used in the classroom. And I've included this final video about this particular program because I feel that it's important for us to know that even if a child is in the red, and that's angry, even if a child is in the blue, there are certain activities in the classroom that are still incredibly effective within these areas. So it's helpful to tell children too, if you're angry, that's not a bad thing. Use that. You can channel it somewhere else. This video is catered towards older children, but it does drive home the point.
Each quadrant of the mood meter is associated with different kinds of thinking and learning activities. When students are in the yellow, they may experience emotions that promote creative thinking and the generation of new ideas. Brainstorming, energetic group activities, and creative problem solving are best done in the yellow. When students are in the red, they may experience emotions that heighten awareness and keep students on their toes. The red is good for competitive activities, like debating, or passionate expression, like promoting a cause. When students are in the blue, they may experience emotions that help them focus for deductive reasoning and critical thinking. In addition, the blue emotions prime students to relate well to others' misfortune, building empathy. The blue promotes success for tasks like proofreading, editing, and detailed analysis. When students are in the green, they may experience emotions that promote self-reflection and consensus building. Students feel comfortable, relaxed, and calm. Activities that involve collaboration are ideal for the green. The best teachers differentiate instruction using the mood meter and capitalize on all quadrants, knowing that all emotions matter.
As I mentioned before, you will learn more about this. Oops, nope, please stop. There we go. You will learn more about these tools as the seminar progresses, but if you're interested in learning a bit more today, you can simply Google or go on YouTube and look for videos on the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, Ruler specifically, and there's a myriad of information out there that you can learn from. And this is only one tool from the Ruler program. The Ruler program has actually developed other tools that help children regulate their emotions. But this, the mood meter, has been one of the most effective tools I've seen in person actually work with children. So just curious, see if I can put you where you are. If you have access to using emojis in the chat group, what emotions are you feeling? These words.
Maybe they could just point out to which one they feel more connected with. What cute faces these are.
Aren't they though? Curious, I see. That's fantastic. So curious would be in the yellow, I believe, down a bit at the bottom. If we go back here. Oh, come on.
Someone's laughing their heart out.
I see that. Yeah, we see some great. I think that this is making sense. Yes. A lot of us are feeling very good. A lot of us are in this yellow zone, which is perfect. Lonely is a completely normal feeling. It's a bit here in the blue, and you'll notice it's lower in energy because it's you feel a bit like you don't want to move. But you can shift that emotion should you want to. Great. Okay. Wonderful. So again, as I mentioned, this will all be explained a bit more tomorrow, but I did want to just give you a snapshot into what tangible tools you can use in the classroom. So this is the final slide, and I just wanted to summarize what we've talked about. Essentially, IQ and EQ gauge different skills, but they're connected. We talked about that at the very beginning. EQ is a higher predictor of success than was previously believed, and they're directly intertwined. Emotional intelligence can be fostered in the classroom through social emotional learning. That is the best way to do it. You are teaching children, you are opening up those neural pathways in the earliest years. Samantha is a program designed to remove the burden from teachers and allow them to easily implement SEL in the classroom. You don't have to start from scratch. We have the tools for you. And it raises the emotional intelligence of all students involved. We've had teachers feedback, we've had reports done, we've had monitoring. It works, and it's concrete tools. It's something you can hold on to. Something you can use and share in the classroom. And I have one more video. I don't know if there's time. Should I show it?
Yes, there's time. Please go ahead.
All right, so this is just, and if this is one of Leslie's very favorite lessons, and it really drives home the ability to teach children empathy, because we're not all born with it, and you sometimes need to teach these skills. And this is a lesson about an apple. And I'll just let it, you know it. I'll let it speak for itself.
I want to show you something with these apples. Have any of you ever been teased before?
No.
Has someone not let you play with them, said something mean to you that made you feel bad? Maybe your brother or your sister?
No.
Yeah? You've felt that before? Doesn't feel very good, right?
My brother.
Yeah, it doesn't feel very nice, right? Well, I want to try something. You see these two apples? They look the exact same, right? Look at this one. I want you to say nice things. I want you to say nice things about it. I'm going to say, you are such a beautiful apple. You have the most beautiful color red that I've ever seen. Ella, can you say something nice to the apple? Give it a try. Give it a try. Okay.
Delicious.
Very good. And what about you, Kaido? Can you say something nice to the apple?
Thank you.
Thank you. That is a very nice thing to say. Okay, now I want to try something else. With this apple, we're going to say mean things to it. Okay? And we're only playing pretend. We never want to say mean things to people. I'm going to say mean things to it. I'm going to say, I don't like you, apple. I don't like you at all. You taste very bad. Can you say something? Yeah?
You do not taste good. I do not like you, apple.
Good. Yeah, that's mean.
I don't like you.
Yeah, that's mean. So this is the beautiful apple, the nice apple that we talked very nice words to. And if we open it up, wow, look at that. How gorgeous is that? It looks delicious. It's perfect. It's perfect. This was the one we said very mean things to. Oh my. Oh no. Do you see that? Do you see how because of our words, it's all beaten up and bruised right on the inside? It doesn't look very healthy. It doesn't look very happy. It looks very damaged. And this is all because of those mean words that we said. Now, what did you say you wanted to do, Ella?
Can we say nice words to it?
You want to say nice words to it? That's very kind of you.
So that is one of the lessons in the program. The teacher just kind of banged the apple against a wall to make it seem like that, but the children really internalize it. And I'm not sure if it's been shared with you, but I know that we have probably in these presentations something a bit similar. Yeah, okay. I don't want to ruin it for you, Manju, so I'll keep my mouth shut.
No, glad you did. This is wonderful.
But yes, so that's emotional intelligence from the perspective of Think Equal and the Samantha program. I hope it was informative and helpful, and we have some time for questions and answers, I believe.
Yes, Amber, you have enough time, I think at least 15 minutes. So I just, if you're done, I just want to say thank you once again for being with us, and your session is getting a lot of appreciation. I just checked on YouTube. There are so many comments coming. They are saying amazing. They are saying well conducted session, very informative and well illustrated. So there are so many comments are coming in appreciation. People are liking your session very much. And thank you for explaining so well. And you made us realize the importance and the power of emotional intelligence. And for me, if I say my takeaway, I have understood emotional intelligence is overall mental being, according to you, what you have said, that emotional intelligence is overall mental being. And also I understood 5 dimensions of emotional intelligence, which you highlighted: self-awareness, empathy, motivation, self-regulation, and social skills. And also, I was amazed to know the kit which is developed at Samanata. Actually, initially, when I heard the word Samanata, I thought Samanata is some name of someone. Because the way you pronounce Samanata, I thought maybe some name. But in Indian context, when I am trying to interpret this word, it is Samanata, equality, right, ma'am? So,
yeah.
Yes, when I heard in English, that is think equal, then I understood it is not Samanata Samman, it is Samanata actually.
Samanta, yeah, saman, some saman कहते हैं ना हिंदी में.
Is equality. That is what Hindi में अगर हम बोलेंगे तो वो बराबर समझ में आता है. But like when everybody was pronouncing like Samanata, I thought maybe it is some name of someone. But now it is very clear. Samanata means think equal.
Yes. An unintentional learning outcome. I'm glad to be able to help.
That is your pronunciation. That's okay. Only thing is that your session is wonderful and amazing work is being done under emotional intelligence and under this organization, Think Equal. And I think each and every teacher should try to incorporate in their teaching. And I hope we will be able to incorporate this very soon in our B.Ed program. So let's take, if there are some questions, I just go through my chat and YouTube. See that there is a lot of appreciation Sazina Venkat is saying thank you so much for this informative session. Then Annette Walter is saying nice way to know children's emotions. Then Vandana Trivedi is saying thank you so much. Session was informative. And participants, if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and then you can just ask directly. Love the videos shared. Mood meter is very good way to know children's emotion that everybody has appreciated. And somebody also written that they also use mood trackers to just track their mood, just track their emotions. So people are understanding all these different activities which are done under emotional intelligence. Wonderful resources. Everybody has appreciated your resources, Amber. The videos and the activities which you have highlighted. Shabri Bhave is saying, love the mood meter and Apple video. Are there any exercises which can be implemented if class strength is more? Actually, in other countries, students are less in number, but in our countries, teachers wants to know whether it is possible or not.
Amber, may I take that?
Yes, please.
I take that question. Definitely Manisha and definitely Sharvari, if that's Sharvari, you asked the question. I think, numbers are all in our mind. At the end of the day, when you are using these concepts and these lesson plans in the classrooms, it works for all, because I'm telling you from my own our own experience in the last 2 years, we've done this with the TMC schools where there have been at least 40 and 50 kids in a class. We've done it with schools across 5 states in the north, and they have had classrooms the size of 35, 40, 50 all. And I have photographs. You can go and look on the Facebook page. You'll see a huge classroom of lovely little kids, doing the Samantha program the whole of last year. So how I look at it personally, Sharvari, is that the concept and the activity is what you need to sit down in a circle and do with the children. Then numbers don't matter. Le de ke kya hoga? The circle will be much bigger. But the point is driven home very easily. So let's not get that in our minds that they have fewer and that's why it's more possible. It's not true. It's happening in Botswana, it's happening in South Africa, it's happening in Sri Lankan classes. I have been to Sri Lanka, seen how it works in Sri Lanka. They have classes as big and large as ours, 40, 45, to aram se every class has that many. So these are workable and very doable concepts, very, very easy to manage in bigger numbers as well.
And if it helps, that video was purely filmed for the purpose of teacher training. That class is much larger.
Yes, exactly.
Agreed.
Yeah, and that's true. Even in the US, I've been to preschools and seen over there, they have kids they have numbers as big as 20, 25, 30 as well. I mean, okay, that's still a luxury, Amber. I won't deny that in India. We do not have class sizes that small, but gradually the value and the merit of having smaller class sizes has started coming into our schools as well. And now I've begun to see a pattern of where there is a co-teacher. So there may be 40 in a class, but you will, right, Manisha, because we are seeing that happening, correct, in our schools, that there is a co-teacher. So there is support for that one teacher to manage 40, 45 children.
Absolutely. I'm seeing a question on how to use the mood meter during online sessions. So not to step on anyone's toes for tomorrow, but I know that Yale has developed an app for the phone that can be downloaded. I believe it's free. I'll share the information with your leaders so they can disseminate properly, but there should be ways to do this virtually. Yes. So wow. Just to address that.
Nice question, Sujina. We can try and we're going to be doing that tomorrow. So online, it will be successful only if everybody keeps their videos on and participates. Then it'll be a little more contextual for everybody. Because if the videos are switched off, emotions ka koi sawal hi nahi aata na. You can't see anything. You can't see anything. So once the videos are on there, see, now I know Bina's mood. I already know where she is. I know where Shika is. I know where Sheetal is. Dekho, now everybody's videos are on. I'm not judging, but I can kind of tell that, aha, if I gave the mood meter, I know where Kiran will be. I know where Sajina will be. I know where Anu will be. I can see where Leela, Radhika and Manisha will be. See? Wow, look at that. Feels so good when everybody's videos get on. Nice. So
Thank you,
tomorrow's
ma'am.
session is going to be just that.
Thank you so much.
I did see one more question on where to, if I can recommend any sites for testing IQ and EQ. I did lots of research here.
You're on mute.
I'm on mute.
No, you're not on
No,
mute.
you're audible. Manisha ma'am is on mute. Now she's not.
Okay.
Somebody has muted me.
Sorry about that. Just to answer that, I have looked, and a lot of the things that I found on the internet are just trying to have you pay money to take theirs. But there are a few sites that I'll share happily that we can disseminate a bit later. I just don't want to drive anyone towards a website that is trying to make you pay for a service, because that's not the point here. But there are some for IQ specifically. I could not find any for EQ.
Okay. So I think there are no more questions and people are just appreciating. So many comments they have written for appreciation. Manjushri, it's time to, there is some issue, I guess. So Manjushri ma'am, it is time to wrap up the session. And I just want to tell you that one of my student, B.Ed student, Miss Diane, she is doing research. She has undertaken a project on SEL. So I just asked her to propose vote of thanks because she will get more insight and she will put her own understanding related to SEL. So I invite Miss Diane for proposing formal vote of thanks. Miss Diane?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Good morning to one and all. On behalf of Bombay Teachers Training College, I, Ms. Diane Gonsalves, takes immense pleasure in thanking each one who has participated in this successful webinar. I would like to begin by expressing my gratitude to our esteemed resource person for today, Ms. Amber Paulson. Thank you, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time and for sharing your knowledge with us on the topic Understanding Emotional Intelligence. To summarize, Ms. Amber Paulson spoke about the importance of emotional intelligence, the positive effects of possessing emotional intelligence, how it is transferred to education, how it can be brought into the classroom, etc. Ma'am spoke about the Ruler program developed by the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and also provided us with significant studies related to the topic. Your knowledge and presence has enlightened us to a great extent. We are thankful to Samantha Education, who, in association with KC College, Bombay Teachers Training College, and Atman Academy, has organized this enriching webinar series for us. Thank you, Dr. Bhagwan Belani, for always providing us with exposure to topics relevant to each and every one of us. A special thank you to Dr. Mandeep Kochar, Dr. Lubna Mansoori, and Dr. Neelu Verma, the in charges of this webinar series. A big thank you to the entire faculty of PTTC for continually supporting and encouraging us in every endeavor that we as a college undertake. I am grateful to Dr. Manisha Tyagi for moderating the session. Thank you, ma'am, for guiding me and giving me this opportunity to present the vote of thanks. Thank you to the members of our technical team for today, Ms. Anju Konai and Ms. Aisha, for coordinating so well in order to make this webinar a success. Last but not the least, a big thank you to our audience for participating wholeheartedly in this webinar. It is truly encouraging to have such a wonderful audience. Do stay on the platform as we now have our next technical session, Emotional Intelligence and the Early Years of a Child by Dr. Kavita Arora. I now request Dr. Rajiv Jha to kindly take forward the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan. It was really wonderful.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you so much.
I'm muted. Thank you, everybody, for participating. I hope you enjoy the rest of it. I'm going to go to bed now.
Yes. Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Right. Amber, I just wanted to know which part of USA you are staying.
I'm in California, so as far away from the other side of the nation.
Dr.
All right.
Rajita.
Thank you again, everybody.
Bye-bye. Take care. Dr. Rajita is there?
Yes, ma'am. May I
let's-
begin?
Yeah, no, let's check for Kavita having joined us, and once we know that for sure, then
Yeah, because it's little early by 10
yes,
minutes.
I asked her to join by 11:25, 11:30. So
Yeah.
we're 5 minutes ahead. Would you guys like to just stay on? Maybe take a little walk. We do that during our online training sessions. We say just get up, go rest your back, and walk and come back so that you are just a little more stretched out when you come back. So maybe you could do that. Grab a cup of tea and a glass of water, perhaps. कहीं भी जाइएगा नहीं, मिलते हैं 5 मिनट के ब्रेक के बाद. I'll just ensure that Kavita joins us. She's busy herself, so I'll just give her a call and find out. Please do be back in 5 minutes exactly. Friends, good morning, Kavita.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you. Hi.
Hi, I'll just turn on my video.
Yes, please.
Yes. There we are.
Hi. So good to see you.
Yes, same here. Same here. Just give me
Right.
1 second. I'll
Take
set
your time. Take your time.
the angle a little bit. Yes, that sounds better. Looks better. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Could you also help me understand what the majority of the audience is? It's a
Yes, yes, definitely. I think I can uh, request Balani sir maybe to talk to Dr. Kavita. So, Dr. Kavita, please meet Dr. Bhagwan Balani. He's the principal of the Bombay Teachers Training College, and a large majority of this audience is from his college. So, sir, could you please just inform Kavita about the audience?
Thank you, Manjushri ma'am. Welcome, Dr. Kavita Arora,
thank you, Ji.
to the collaborative platform jointly organized by IIT Secretary, KC College, Bombay Teachers Training College, Samanta Education, Think Equal UK, and supported by Early Childhood Education Association. This is truly a wonderful collaborative approach, and the kind of reforms that we have envisioned through the NEP 2020. This is just the beginning. And I'm very happy that a very comprehensive program has been designed and developed in the form of this international 6-day webinar series to reach out to the professionals who are there in the field. The purpose is to sensitize them as far as giving importance to the early childhood education in India is concerned. Because majoritarily, even the NCT and even the government of India and all state government has ignored the early childhood education, and they have left it to the private sector. No regulations are there, as we have got regulation for B.Ed or the secondary teachers training are concerned. But I believe that now henceforth NCT is working on developing the curriculum in the form of 4-year integrated programs like BA, B.Ed, BSc, B.Ed, whereas they have also included the training for the teachers from the level of pre-primary to primary. So very soon, NCT will come up with a draft. But as far as strategies to execute these guidelines are concerned, entirely depends upon how comfortable we are, how knowledgeable we teachers are, and how we can implement those ideas and can really help the children shape their personalities as far as their social and emotional intelligence is concerned. We have experienced in the last 40 to 50 years that we have created intellectuals. Maybe in the field of science, we have got ISRO, we have got so many big organizations in India, and we have done significantly well as far as the development of the science is concerned. But very less work has been done as far as early childhood education is concerned, primary education is concerned. Even in remote areas, at least 30 to 40%, we haven't reached out to the poor population in India, which requires organized pre-primary education. And I believe that efforts like these will definitely sensitize to all the teachers, help them to understand what are our requirements and how we can take these programs at the grassroots level to the need of the hour. So we are trying our level best, and we are also getting wonderful response from the society, and we will keep this journey. We will keep continue our collaborative efforts till we achieve a significant success in reaching out to the masses. And Bombay Teachers Training College, being a constituent college of HSLC University, we are also working on developing the curriculum, whereas a comprehensive program can be offered at Bombay Teachers Training College. for the early childhood education level. No doubt we have got one program, but still a lot of new things are to be added to that. Maybe technology, maybe the new guidelines which are being emerging to be relevant as far as the present times are concerned. And in developing these kind of programs, I'm looking forward the contribution of all the stakeholders. I'm also looking forward the contribution of experts like you. And I will request Manjushri madam. She's the most enthusiastic person, and I'm very happy that she's in the leading role. And I think she's also one of the members of our BTDC family now. So we will be working together. We'll be developing such curriculum for such programs, so that and nowadays one thing which is happening for which I'm very happy is the digital revolution. We are able to connect across the globe, and as a result of that, we don't need much resources, financial and even the human resources. The only thing is that there should be will. हमारे लेट मी टेल यू हमारे पास संसाधनों की कमी नहीं है हमें 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 जो है हम लोगों में एक इच्छा शक्ति होनी चाहिए एक अपनापन होना चाहिए
बिल्कुल
उसको लेकर के जो है हम मुझे लगता है बहुत आगे जा सकते हैं और मैं आपका शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहता हूँ कि इस कार्यक्रम में इस ये जो है हमने जो बीड़ा उठाया है उसमें आप हमें सहयोग कर रहे हैं उसके लिए मैं आपका धन्यवाद करना चाहता हूँ ये शब्दों के साथ मैं आपका स्वागत करता हूँ
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद थैंक यू फॉर गिविंग मी द अपॉर्चुनिटी
Thank you so much sir. I think Dr. Jha is going to take it this point forward.
To Dr. Rajiv Jha. Kavita ma'am, Dr. Rajiv Jha is a double PhD holder. One is advanced, one is in education.
Acha.
He's a wonderful human being. He is heading the cultural education at Bombay Teachers Training College.
Okay.
His contribution is very, very significant. He's a very senior colleague at Bombay Teachers Training College. And we are very happy to have a colleague like him. And Raju sir, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such warm and lovely words for me. Namaskar to each and everyone. In this session, Samanta Education India, in association with the KC College and the Bombay Teachers Training College, a constituent colleges of HSNC University Mumbai, as well as Atman Academy, presents Reimagining Early Years Education, a comprehensive 6-day international online workshop series on social and emotional learning, SEL, in the early years education for positive life outcomes. Welcome to the third day, second session of this workshop series. The construct of emotional intelligence, EI in short, refers to a distinct group of mental abilities in which individuals perceive, appraise, and express emotions, use emotions to facilitate thinking, understand the antecedents and consequences of emotions, and regulate emotions in self and others. These abilities dovetail well with what has been termed in the developmental psychology literature as emotional competence. Young children's emotional competence, expression of useful emotions, knowledge of emotions of self and others, and regulation of their own and others' emotional expressiveness and experience when necessary, contributes to their social and pre-academic adjustment, both concurrently and across time. As has been told by Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher, let me quote, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. An educated heart is a connected one. Emotional intelligence grows when a heart is connected, and it withers when one is neglected or disconnected. Emotional intelligence is not a luxury but a necessity. An educated heart feels supported significant, valued, and included, whereas an uneducated heart lacks these foundational needs and as a result cannot learn or love in the same profound way. In our schools, pastoral care is extremely important but plays second fiddle to academic outcomes. School timetables, pupil outcomes, and Ofsted reports reflect this. Emotional intelligence is seen as significant but not at heart of education. Particularly to my students of the early childhood education program, I would bring to their notice that in the coming semester, semester 2, in the child development and psychology paper that I teach, we have emotional intelligence as one of the important topics of developmental aspect of the child. And that is why this session is of utmost importance to all my students. In fact, the whole series, but particularly this session, because the resource person is going to educate us and throw light upon the emotional intelligence in the early ages. So, before that, before I hand over the session to our resource person, Dr. Kavita Arora, I request, as has been our tradition, I request and invite our student Sharmeen to formally introduce the resource person of the day. Over to you, Sharmeen.
Thank you, sir. A very good morning to one and all. It is rightly said, if we start being honest about our anger, our pain, and our emotions, instead of pretending that they do not exist, we will leave the world as a better place than we found it. Yes, emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage our own emotions, and this will help us to succeed in life and to form better relationships with others. Today, we are honored to have with us Dr. Kavita Arora ma'am as our resource person who will provide us with her valuable insights about emotional intelligence and the early years of the child. Ma'am, we welcome you to the BTTC virtual platform. Ma'am is a child and adolescent psychiatrist and she loves to connect with children and young people. She's had a firm belief that youngsters today are far more smarter and quicker to learn and evolve as compared to the previous generations. She believes that children should be taught how to think rather than what to think. Ma'am is also the co-founder of the Children First organization that provides the mental health services to children and adolescents. The organization firmly embodies the belief that a small group of passionately connected and determined individuals can create a movement for the voice of our children to be heard. Their vision is to create communities of concern for our children. They have strived to do this for over a decade now by providing clinical services, school programs, trainings, etc. Ma'am, we are extremely honored and privileged to have you here today with us. Ma'am, I would now request you to take over the session.
Thank you so much. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. Thanks, Sharmeen. Thank you, Dr. Jha.
Namaskar, ma'am. Thank you so
Namaskar.
much.
Namaskar ji. Namaskar. I think at the outset, what I would like to ask is if it is okay whether I go into Hindi sometimes in between. Is that going to be all right with the audience? Can
Bilkul,
everybody
ma'am.
just give me a reaction to let me know
Bilkul,
whether
ma'am.
part
We have
Hindi and
a
English?
we have a
Is that
diverse
okay?
audience.
Excellent, excellent. So in case anybody at that point of time wants me to convert into English, please just put it on the chat and I will be, thank you so much for agreeing to that. I sometimes seem to do that. The other thing I'd like to ask the host is whether I could also share screen. Yes, I've just been given that ability. So what I'm going to do is to also have a small PowerPoint presentation. And
Ma'am, let me also inform you, probably you're aware, but still it's my duty to inform you that we also have audience on our official YouTube channel.
Okay.
So I shall be entertaining queries which they would be posting in the YouTube channel as
That's
well as
lovely.
from the Zoom chat.
That is lovely.
So you can let me know if you would like to take the questions in between or you would like to take at the end of your presentation.
So the
Choice
chat
is yours.
questions, so what I will do is I'm going to do this in 2 parts.
Okay.
And after the first part, I will wait for a few minutes. We will look at the chat questions. If there are appropriate ones that I'm not answering in the second one, then I will take those then. And then at the end, again, for about 15 to 20 minutes, we'll leave time for questions.
Sure, ma'am.
Yeah.
I request the volunteers please note the request of ma'am. This is the way we are going to proceed. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so
Over
much.
to you. Over to
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I always talk about the early childhood years as the wonder years. It's the time that children and people who interact with children and adults, we are filled with wonder, and these are wonderful years as well, which I think are probably the most precious years. So what am I going to try and do, just for everyone to try and understand what I am going to attempt today, and why am I here? Yeah, why am I here really? So I'm going to tell you a story that has stayed with me for many, many years. ये कहानी मैंने बहुत साल पहले, about 10 years ago, somebody had narrated it to me. It has never left me. The story was that one day this man who is walking near a river sees the hands of a child and a cry for help in the river. The child seems to be drowning and is crying out for help. Ki bacha lo, I'm drowning. And this man who knows swimming, he looks around to see, how is this child alone? Why is this child drowning? Why is there no carer? And he realizes he can't see anyone, so he jumps right in. He swims out to the child, drags the child back to the bank, and tries to get him onto the bank. As he puts the child onto the bank, he hears another cry for help. And he looks around to see that there is another child in the middle of the river who's also drowning. So he turns right back and he swims back to the second child. And he tries to rescue. As he's rescuing the second child and swimming back to the bank, he realizes that there is a lot of clamor, a lot of noise on the bank of the river. And he looks up to see that there are many adults who seem to be parents of these children, who are shouting, screaming, looking very frantic and worried, and are pointing to the middle of the river. So he puts this child onto the bank, hands it to the parents, and he looks back and he sees there is not one, not two, not three, but many children who seem to be in the middle of the river, and they're drowning. And on the bank now is a collection of many, many parents and adults who are clamoring, who are worried, who are frantic, who are shouting. And they're looking at him and saying, we can't swim, we don't know how to. Will you please save our children? And he realizes that he's the only one who knows how to swim. What does the man do next? He gets out. All these parents are clamoring, worried, telling him to go back in and save their child. There are many children in the river. They see him getting out and he starts walking upstream, starts walking alongside the bank upstream. And all these parents are worried and they're saying, why are you going away? We don't know how to swim. We don't know how to save our children. That's my child. That's my daughter. That's my son. Please save them. And he keeps walking up. And he looks back at them and they say, why are you running away? He says, I'm not running away. I'm walking upstream to try and see who's pushing these children into the river. Because that's the person we've got to stop. That is what has to stop.
Oh my God.
Because I'm alone and I can't save all of them, and you don't know how to swim. So this is where I think we are. Our children really, I find, don't know how to swim in this world. And many of the parents, many of the teachers, many of the professionals, we don't know how to help teach them that swimming. I think the urgency of what's happening in the world today and what's happening with our children is something that has stayed with me with this story. And that's why I'm here today. That's why I choose not to just sit inside my clinic. That's why I choose to go out and speak. So what am I going to try and do today is to share some of the collective wisdom that children have taught me, that has come from what I have learned with families. As a psychiatrist, I often meet little children, older children, young adults. I meet lots of families. But I also try and keep up to date with science. And there have been very many recent advances in neuroscience, in the way that we look at what's happening in the brain in a child versus an adult, and the story of the brain, really. And I thought that in the beginning, I'd share that story with you, because that's sometimes hard to come by. So what I'm going to try and do is, in part one, to talk to you about the story of the early years from the point of view of neuroscience, from the point of view of what's happening in the child when they are born and right after, and what's happening in the environment in context with that brain. In part two, we will then talk about, so how does this help us? There are 200 of us, 200 odd people sitting here as adults. All of us are connected to children in some way or the other. How do you translate this to everyday life? The simple question of what can I do? How can each one of us contribute? कर क्या सकते हैं? होगा ये science, लेकिन करें क्या? That would be part two. But first, a little bit about, because it makes sense to me only when I know the concept. So I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to translate a little bit of that as a concept to you about what I've learned. Yeah. Please feel free to write questions as we go along into the chat. So this is the story of the brain, really. हमारा brain जो होता है, हमारा जो मस्तिष्क के अंदर, so this part, जिसको हिंदी में या हमारे स्क्रिप्चर्स में कहा गया है कि मस्तिष्क पे तीसरी आंख होती है, the sixth sense lies here. In science, if we look at it, the posterior part of the brain is the brain that is the most ancient. That's where we started with the brain. The brain used to be from the posterior and has grown upward. This part of the brain, which is absolutely at the front, called the prefrontal cortex or the frontal cortex, is the most recent evolution of the human brain. If you look at apes, if you look at monkeys, this part is sunk. Most of the mammals that you see a horse, you see a dog, you see any other mammals, the snout is here, but the forehead is at the back. The brain is at the back. In our species, the brain has expanded to the front to lie flat with the face. What does that mean? For mammals, the size of the brain and the size and the snout is very different. The apes, this is a little bit forward. But in human beings, the species anthropologically, the face has not grown, the brain has grown. What part of the brain has grown? The prefrontal lobe, the frontal lobe. What does the frontal lobe do? इतना क्यों बढ़ गया? पीछे वाले ब्रेन से हमारा काम क्यों नहीं चला? What part does this control? And this is where, when you talk about our scriptures, about the Yoga Sutras, this is the seat of wisdom. This is the seat of executive function. This is the seat of what organizes. This is the conductor of the orchestra. बाकी सारी चीजें काम करती हैं, ये वाला पार्ट उनको डायरेक्ट करता है. ये डायरेक्टर ऑफ द ब्रेन है, ये सेक्रेटरी ऑफ द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है. ये चीज ये करेगी, ये चीज ये करेगी, इसको अभी कम करना है. और कंडक्टर ऑफ द ऑर्केस्ट्रा, अभी वायलिन कम हो जाएगी, अभी ये वाला बढ़ाना है, अभी इसको कम कर दो, इसको बढ़ा दो. ये जो कोऑर्डिनेशन हो रहा है, दिस इज कमिंग फ्रॉम द विजडम. द part of the brain is the frontal brain. Now, this growth that we are talking about in the brain, what does it mean? Does it grow in size? Is that what we are saying? Just like the liver or everything else? Or is it not just in volume? Now, what we know is that by this age of 6 or 7, weight-wise, the brain has reached what it will be even in adult, 1.3, 1.4 kgs. By the age of 7, weight and volume of the brain is almost adult size. So then what is maturation? What is growth? Growth is not about structure. It is not about size. It is about something else. And that's what neuroscience is finding now. That the brain actually has the capacity to learn throughout the lifespan. Even till the day we die, even an old person has the capacity to learn and change. And this is a miracle. Everything in the body does not have that capacity. Once the bones have grown, they don't change very much. They can break, but they don't change very much. Once the liver has grown, it doesn't change very much. Once the heart has reached a place, it doesn't change very much. There is degeneration. The brain is very different. It can learn. What is the difference? The difference is that the speed of growth is maximum in the early years. What does that mean? That means the concept of neuroplasticity. What does that mean? That means that when we talk about, for example, clay, जब हम कहते हैं कि हम गीली मिट्टी से कुछ बना रहे हैं, तो कितनी जल्दी बनता है? The shape becomes very quickly, it goes into shape. अब ये मिट्टी धीरे धीरे पक गई, इसको हमने बेक कर दिया. अब इसी चीज पे अगर आप लाइन खींचेंगे तो उतने प्रेशर से आपको वो लाइन नहीं दिखेगी. इसका मतलब क्या है कि जब अर्ली इयर्स होते हैं, during the early years, in the first 6 to 7 years of life, the brain is maximally neuroplastic. What does that mean? It is learning at the fastest speed, quickest speed, and forming connections. How does it learn? It learns via connectivity. So if we have talked about growth is not because of weight or height or volume of the brain, then what is causing these changes? What's causing these changes is if there are two cells and there are billions and millions of neurons in the brain, these are the main bricks. How do they connect to each other? They connect through connections or synapses. So if you see this slide, what you see is at birth, the neurons are present, but they are not connected to each other thickly. What does brain growth mean? What does learning mean? What is education doing? What is numeracy literacy? Is the formation of these connections. By 6 years, the connections are thicker. They have so many connections. But what's happening at 14 then? Why are the connections looking less? This is the story of the brain. So at birth, neurons are present, not connected to each other. From the age of 0 to 3, everything the child is experiencing, even a glance, even a noise, even the sound of a song, the sound of language, what they see, what they experience inside. When they cry, what is the response that the child is getting? Is my mother smiling at me? Am I getting the security and comfort of the Godi? All this is forming connections between neurons. These experiences build the brain architecture. They combine the bricks. Which brick will actually speak to which brick? This is getting made through the connections till the age of 6 or 7 and later as well. But that's the fastest time, most neuroplastic time. The brain is most malleable and is learning very actively. Now, this was not something that we knew 10 to 12 years ago. Everybody used to think 0 to 3 are silent years. Nothing's really happening inside the child till they start talking. It's only when they go to school will they learn. And this is diametrically opposite to what we know today, that the child is learning and building the foundations of the brain in the early years. Everything will build on top of this. The architecture, the foundations will be laid in the early years. So these synapses are very important. And neurons that fire together will wire together. What does that mean? That means what you are seeing at the 14-year age. Between the 6 to 14 years, there's another thing happening, which is called pruning. So lots of connections are there. The possibility of one neuron getting connected to 99 other neurons is there. So then my brain should be very confused because I can connect to so many things at all times. So what will determine which connections are going to become stronger? That is what is happening between 6 and 14 and thereafter. The ones that are being used most, the ones that are genetically determined, the ones that are giving joy, the ones that the brain gets gravitated towards are the ones that will last longer. The rest will get pruned. What does pruning mean? Pruning is like when the gardener prunes a hedge. It shapes a hedge. When you take a pair of garden shears, and everybody knows that when plants grow, you might have to cut off a little bit of the plant for it to grow well. That's called pruning in gardening. But this is the way the brain also grows. There are parts of the brain as it grows that will become redundant and go away. So if you are not using those parts in the early years, they are very likely not going to remain as good grounded parts. By the age of 14, the wiring is starting to happen. The connections are starting to get stronger. As they get stronger, it will determine by the age of about 25, 24 to 25, now we know that many of these connections will get pruned, they will become wiring, and slowly the person's personality by the age of 24, 25 starts becoming quite obvious. Earlier, people used to talk about it by 18. However, now neuroscience knows that 24 to 25 years of age, the first 24 to 25 years of age, are the time when a lot of changes are happening in the brain, and we are learning. Children and young adults are learning different things. So as an example, if you teach a child at 10 or 11 to, for the first time, ride a bicycle, for example, and you teach me at 40 plus to to ride a bicycle for the first time, the speed at which I will learn and the speed at which the child will learn will be very different. It's not that I can't learn. I can. But the amount of effort it will take me to learn and the amount of effort it takes an 11-year-old to learn that is going to be very different. The 6-year-old will learn it even faster. So the speed is very important. And therefore, it brings me to this part where we say this is actually the most sensitive time. When we say that in policy and in our thinking, this is not the time, the 0 to 6 or 0 to 12 is not the time we have given a lot of attention to. Children have just grown up. And that's when we start giving them attention. But actually, neuroscience wise, we are finding that this is the most sensitive time in brain formation. The dramatic changes are happening in very short spaces of time, and that the foundation is being laid, and the later experiences will add to this foundation. So it's like saying नींव डल रही है उस टाइम पे, पर हम नींव की तरफ ध्यान नहीं दे रहे हैं. हमने सीड की तरफ ध्यान नहीं दिया है, क्योंकि सीड जो है वो तो ग्राउंड के अंदर डाल दी, अब दिख नहीं रही. जब प्लांट उगेगा और बड फूटेगी और बाहर आएगा, हम तब उसको पानी देना शुरू करेंगे. ये कॉन्सेप्ट जो है न्यूरोसाइंस का, जो अभी हमें पता चल रहा है कि वो सीड तो सबसे पहले अंदर, उसकी तरफ ध्यान देना बहुत जरूरी है. And the third principle that we have found is that it is parallel development. It is not linear. What does that mean? That means ये नहीं होता कि पहले ये बनेगा और फिर ये बनेगा. पहले लैंग्वेज आएगी फिर इमोशंस आएंगी, या पहले बॉडी होएगी बाद में सेंसेस बनेंगी. This is not linear. It is happening together. The emotions, the social concept, the understanding of the world, language, intelligence, all of them are happening together. Yes, there are sensitive times at different stages, but they do not occur in isolation. Nothing occurs in isolation in the brain. It is all about connectivity. It is not about structure. So just as an example, if I say to you, there is no singular structure in the brain that's responsible for reading or for numeracy or for writing. There is no structure in the brain. That's the writing part of the brain. So how do we learn? How does a child, or you and I, how do we learn? We learn first how to do the motor skill, if I'm talking about writing, how to hold the pencil, different part of the brain. One circuit which actually picks up the motor skill, another circuit which picks up the visual skill, another circuit which picks up how to use my hand to make that shape which is in my mind onto paper. So what are we teaching? What is the education in this? We are bringing several circuits and neurons together, connecting them to each other, rehearsing it repeatedly, and that is how writing happens. So we are training the brain. We are training the brain to come together, bring various circuits together. That's what training the brain means. That's how we acquire skills. That's how even speaking happens. That's how running happens. So the brain is not about structure. The brain is about connections, things that happen together in the setting of connectivity and integration. So that part, it's no, that you can't wait till later to start working on something, is very important to understand in early childhood education now. So the maturation and growth is determined by connections, not by volume or structure. So if we are agreeing to that, and if this is what neuroscience is telling us, connections can be many. If there are 1 billion neurons in the brain, then it is mind-boggling what the possibility of connection is. One can connect to another, another can connect to another. This is very confusing, but this is the truth. This is the truth that each one of us is therefore unique. Although all of us have the same bricks, all of us have similar neurons, the way they connect to each other is different in each one of us. What does that mean? That we are absolutely diverse and unique. We all know this for a fact. So neurodiversity, can in one child this connect in a different way? Do they write differently from someone else? Do they learn to read in a different way? Do they learn to? Yes, we all know that. We know that learning follows a different path in every child. We know that preference to which connection, how they learn, how quickly they learn, what is the best methodology for learning is different in every child. So neurodiversity, or the way the brain is structuring itself and building itself, is different in every child, is a truth that we all know. However, when it comes to our expectations in growth, what do we usually find? What do I want one child to be like? What are we training them? And this is a question I often ask myself. That this is a paradox we carry. We tell children to be like someone else, or be like this, to conform, be same to something that we have developed as a concept of normal. On the other hand, the truth is that the brain is going to grow in their own unique experience with the truth of diversity. And this paradox is what the child is growing up in. Whether it is in education, where 20, 30, 40 of them are sitting in a classroom, studying the same curriculum, in the same way, on the same day, with the same teacher. In learning, where we are giving them the same homework, asking them to do the same assignment. At home, where they are being taught to do similar things. And in our expectations of what a 4-year-old child can do. All the books that talk about what a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old does talks about a certain criteria, certain set of criteria. This is what a 4-year-old should be able to do in the motor skill. This is what they should be able to do in their education. This is what they should be able to do in academics. This is what, where is the diversity? Where is the brain connection being unique in this entire picture? And that's where we carry this paradox, I think, within ourselves and within our social this thing. So I'm leaving that question right now for all of us to think about, because I often come back to this dilemma that we are growing in this paradox of diversity versus an expectation of conformity and similarity. The second part of how the brain grows is there is no brain or no human being that will grow in isolation by itself. It grows in context. What does that mean? That there is an environment in which each one of us is growing. And what neuroscience is also telling us is that experience of the environment influences the architecture of the brain. What does that mean? That means that experiences, what I have done, so in a very small way, if I cry as a baby and I get different responses from the environment. If I cry because I'm hungry and my mother gives me milk and I feel satisfied and I'm happy, that is a response I got from them because of my crying. What will happen when I'm hungry next? I will cry again. I will get milk. I'll be happy again. I have learned that in response to my crying, I get satiated. So that part of my wiring will grow. This has become communicative. I do this, the environment or my mother does that. Now I love my mother. Every time I am hungry, I will cry because I know it will bring me milk. Imagine if the environment does not give the child milk. So the child is crying, does not get milk the first time because the mother is not around. The child is either in an orphanage or the mother is not available or whatever the reason. The mother is unwell, the father is not around. What is this child, what is this brain going to do? It's going to cry more. And as it keeps crying, studies have shown a little while later, it gives up. Now, if you give it milk, what has this child learned? The brain doesn't know whether it came from crying or not. So the next time it doesn't know what to do. It might cry again. And if the response is not of getting this thing, then that part of the wiring has that crying is not going to help me. So there is no point in crying to get milk. So my frustration is going to be elsewhere. I might start banging my head. I might start, and this is how the context or the response from the environment will build the structure of the brain. So the experiences build brain architecture. And this has become a very, very important part of what science is now looking at. That even in the early years, whatever the child's context is, whether at home or in school, these experiences that the child is having will determine everything else that happens later in life because these are the foundations. And there's a very, very nice, I'm going to share a movie and see if, can you see the movie? I'm just going to, are you able to hear is everyone
Your
able to
PPT
hear
is presented at the moment, ma'am.
Okay.
Experiences build brain architecture.
Yes, that one. Yeah. Is that visible? Experiences build brain architecture?
The
We
slide.
have a slide, a PowerPoint
You might have
slide.
to unshare and share the particular screen that you are showing. The one that you are showing on.
Yeah, just give me a second.
Okay,
now? Yeah?
Yes.
There's no audio for the same right now.
You have to share the computer audio.
Provide the basic blueprint.
Now?
It is audible.
During the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons
Yes, ma'am.
signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a
Video we can.
reinforced through repeated use.
Yes, perfect.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Okay. So going back to where we were. So then I think what we are talking about now is, so then what kind of an environment do we need to provide? What are the available environments usually for our children in the 0 to 6? One is home. What is the community? So if the child steps out from home, in their neighborhood or in their school, in the extended family. What about a playground? Do these children have playgrounds? And what is the kind of media they are consuming? These are most of the regular social functions that children might go to, the peer group that they might be in. These are the usual regular environments that a child is. Maximum amount of time when they are much younger is with the family, and then they are accessing most of these environments. So each time, each part, each little moment in these environments is building the brain. I think that's the key that we need to stay with. That it's not about when the child is at school only, or when the child is entering a particular room and we are starting to teach, that's when learning is happening in these years. It's not. It's happening at all times, even in the waiting area, even in the playground, even at home, even in the way that someone is talking about an experience. Each little thing is important and is an opportunity of learning when it comes to this part, 0 to 6 years, or 0 to 5 years, or 0 to 7 years, I would say, the current environment. So I'm going to come back to these slides a little bit later, but what that tells us really is that there seems to be a science and policy gap. The policies for education came in with a different intent. And the science that has been more recently acquired says something different now. So the focus of early childhood, if at all there has been a focus of early childhood, Policies have been, the focus has been on physical health, nutrition, academic readiness for school, learning, and cognition. The social, the emotional, the setting, the context, the understanding of relationships, the empathy, compassion, happiness, joy, all this setting play, this has not been necessarily the focus of education. However, when we are now looking at what science is telling us, that a child can only pay attention when they are happy, and that you cannot wait for happiness to be created at 20 after they have received education. You cannot say that because you will receive good education, you will become happy. The happiness, the capacity for joy, the readiness for relationships is not something we can wait for, because your brain's foundations about these things also is being laid. So traditionally, education and our narrative to the children has been first do this, then do that. However, what neuroscience is telling us, it's all happening simultaneously. Your two floors will already be made by the time they will be 20. The social emotional readiness will not be present. At that point of time, if you tell a child, now you need to learn how to regulate yourself, now you need to learn how to be happy with others, now you need to learn how to collaborate, now you need to learn how to create your own happiness and joy and satisfaction. That's not going to work. So I think this science policy gap is something that we are now, thankfully, becoming more aware of. Um, but what do you do then? How do you approach this dilemma? That most of the time, if I ask parents, especially mothers in India, do you know what your child has eaten during the day? 99% of them will know what the child has eaten during the day. Exact amount, what was being made, and if I ask them, what has your child been feeling during the day? Have they shared with you what they are thinking about during the day? Do you know what the diet of emotions has gone in? Do you know who has said what they have learned today? If it is not at school, most people do not know, because these are not the questions they are asking. These are not this is not the mindfulness that we are going ahead with. So language, how many words does your child speak? Have they learned to speak? These are all things that most people know. 1, 2, 3, 4. Does your child know that? Yes or no? Everybody knows. So language, communication, intellectual, physical, motor, sensory, these are things that parents, teachers knows. The hidden areas are the social and emotional. However, if I ask you, what is needed? What is our learning and your and my learning from specially 2020, from the last year? What is really needed, whether it is a child or an adult? And of course, there are many, many answers to this, but one of the biggest answers that I have found is resilience. What does a human being truly need, whether it is during a time of disaster, or it is a time of attempting something new, or it is a time of, what do they need? They need resilience. They need the ability to bounce back. As simple as that. They need the ability to carry on. Where do children get that from? Are we cultivating that? What can we do to cultivate it? Because if we are not teaching them or cultivating or nurturing this in the early years, because we don't know how to, or we are not even paying attention to this, then to expect it in the later years is going to be difficult, because the foundations have not been laid. And this is, I think, truly my learning of 2020, which I wanted to share with you, that resilience does not come from literacy or numeracy or arithmetic. Resilience comes from elsewhere. And I think we have to rediscover and discover where resilience comes from in children. A very, very short, but a beautiful test that was done about self-regulation, about the ability to be resilient, about the ability to self-regulate. I don't know if some of you have seen this experiment or not. It was done in Europe, but I'm going to share the video, and then we will talk about part 2. I will take some questions. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to open this and then. Yeah. Please let me know if it is working when it starts.
I'm here because I have a very important message. I think we have found the most important factor for success. And it was found close to here, Stanford. Psychology professor took kids that were 4 years old and put them in a room all by themselves. And he would tell the child, a 4-year-old kid, Johnny, I'm going to leave you here with a marshmallow, 15 minutes. If I come back, this marshmallow is here, you will get another one. So you will have two. To tell a 4-year-old kid to wait 15 minutes for something that they like is equivalent to tell us, we'll bring you coffee in 2 hours. So, what happened when the professor left the room? As soon as the door closed, 2 out of 3 ate the marshmallow. 10 seconds, 40 seconds, 50 seconds, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 8 minutes. Some lasted 14 and a half minutes. Couldn't do it. Couldn't wait. What's interesting is that 1 out of 3 would look at the marshmallow and go like this. Look at it, put it back. They would walk around. They would play with their skirts and pants. That child already at 4 understood the most important principle for success, which is the ability to delay gratification. Self-discipline, the most important factor for success. 15 years later, 14, 15 years later, follow-up study. What did they find? They went to look for these kids who were now 18 and 19, and they found that 100% of the children that had not eaten the marshmallow were successful. They had good grades, they were doing wonderful, they were happy, they had their plans, they had good relationship with the teachers, students, they were doing fine. A great percentage of the kids that ate the marshmallow, they were in trouble. They did not make it to the university, they had bad grades, some of them dropped out, a few were still there with bad grades, a few had good grades. I had a question in my mind. Would Hispanic kids react the same way as American kids? So I went to Colombia and I reproduced the experiment, and it was very funny. I used 4, 5, and 6 years old kids. And let me show you what happened.
Hasta para un niño de 4 años, es atractiva la idea de tener el 100% de retorno a la inversión en 15 minutos. Sin embargo, algunos de ellos, tan pronto la puerta se cerró, se pusieron inmediatamente.
It's so cute.
Otros, en cambio, resistieron el impulso.
Colombia, Hispanic kids, 2 out of 3 ate the marshmallow, 1 out of 3 did not. This little girl was interesting. She ate the inside of the marshmallow. In other words, she wanted us to think that she had not eaten it, so she would get 2, but she ate it. So we know she'll be successful, but we have to watch her. Okay? She should not go into banking, for example, or work in a cash register, but she will be successful. And this applies for everything, even in sales. The salesperson that customer says, I want that, and I say, okay, here you are. The person ate the marshmallow. If the salesperson said, wait a second, let me ask you a few questions to see if this is a good choice, then you sell a lot more. So this has applications in all walks of life. I end with the Koreans did this. You know what? This is so good. We want a marshmallow book for children. And we did one for children, and now it's all over Korea. They're teaching these kids exactly this principle. And we need to learn that principle here in the States because we have a big debt. We're eating more marshmallows than we're producing. Thank you so much.
So both the talks that I'm talking about are in the public domain. So anybody who wishes to sort of watch them again, they are present, and I can give you the resources. That shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so so this is more about the science that we are talking about, and I'm going to stop here and try and see whether we have questions before we go to part 2, where we are going to talk a little bit more about what each one of us can do. And this I'd like to be more a brainstorming session. You have some examples, but in the Indian context, in our context, what do you think? What do we think we can do? So I'm going to stop here for 5 minutes, get some questions.
Ma'am, as of now, there are no questions on the YouTube channel, nor
Okay.
on the Zoom chat, but
Okay.
there are appreciations like Meera Swami, a participant, mentioned nice explanation. Sachin Patil mentioned useful information. So I guess on the Zoom chat, they have the access directly to unmute themselves. I think a raised hand by our student, ECP student Monica. Monica, over to you. You can ask a question. Unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Hi, ma'am. It's a lovely session. So, while we were talking about pruning, you said the connection which are, more used, and, connection which brings us more joy becomes more stronger. So, are these connection only which bring us joy is become stronger, or, what if someone experiences connections which are more on a sadder and, not much happier side? Then what happened to these connections?
They also become stronger. So anything with intense emotion. So there is another concept that there are also dramatic experiences, traumatic experiences. Trauma can cause also, so any intense emotion, not just joy.
Okay.
I think what we are talking about here is several things coming together. Yeah. What science is finding is meaningfulness, emotion, and cognition will happen together. They don't have separate circuits. So if we say, for example, that learn ABCD and repeat it 20 times, and because of the rehearsal, you will learn literacy. But if I am feeling very bad right now and I'm aversive to this context because of something that's happening inside me, then my attentional circuit is not going to be on the rehearsal of one ABCD. My attentional circuit is going to be on the traumatic experience I'm having, on the discomfort that I have. So I will need much, much longer to learn that circuit. But alongside learning the 1, 2, 3, 4 or ABCD, I also have learned that gives me pain. So this will co-occur. That is what it means, that the platform for learning and attention, those circuits will get connected. It is not separate. So you can't separate the emotion. So if I do not enjoy what I'm doing in terms of learning, then I'm not going to be open to it with the same kind of attention the next time.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. So whether it is a traumatic experience or painful or joyful, or emotions are happening in context at that time, cannot be separated. That's the meaning of it. Does that make sense?
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, there is
Dr.
a-
Jha, Dr.
yeah.
Jha, may I ask a question? Leena
Yes,
here. Dr.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, hi, Dr. Kavita Arora. It's such a pleasure listening to you. I also heard you at the FEM workshop and I just so liked it. So I have a query. You said these are, the age between 0 and 6 is the most important age where the neurons are getting connected initially and then they become dense and then a process of pruning happens. Now, what happens in the case of those children who in many ways remain socially and emotionally inadequate? And the discovery happens at the age of 20, let's say 20, 22. And you also said that at that age to learn, it gets difficult. But you also said that the brain is the only organ in the body which keeps growing. So, which is what I want. What happens because I know some people, and in whose case something like that has happened. And they seem to be these are young girls who seem to be so conflicted. And I'm trying to tell them, you can still, it's okay. One can even kind of overcome this. But I don't know. They also get into this whole, someone is doing therapy, someone is under the treatment of a psychiatrist. I see a lot of improvement, but I also see a lot of dip in between. So what does one tell them as a teacher? I'm a feminist teacher. What does one tell them? I mean, that's something I want to know from you.
So I don't know whether there's a science behind that. I can tell you what I usually do in that regard. But first, to answer the science-based question, because I think that's a very good question and it's new knowledge. So it is the absolute truth that the brain will shape and reshape throughout life. So the capacity to change and make new connections is available throughout life. That is absolutely true. It's only the relative speed and ease that is different. Yeah, that's one. That in the early years, especially 0 to 3, so it's called the first 1,000 days of life, is the most neuroplastic. वो गिली मिट्टी है.
Okay.
Single stroke will make it and shape it. It doesn't mean that later it can't be done. It's just harder and more effortful. And the other part of it is, in later life, more dramatic or intense experiences will be needed to make changes. They will still make changes. So a trauma at 20, for example, it doesn't mean it will not have an effect.
Okay.
Yeah. Or a mental illness or an accident or something at 20.
Okay.
Or 30 or 40, it doesn't mean it will not have an effect on the brain. It will still have an effect on the brain. What is different is that some of the connections have already been made. So the foundations have been laid in a certain way. Yeah. So it's the dramatic nature or the meaningfulness nature of it. So if you believe in stories, in our mythology, in the Indian tradition, Ashoka turned an absolute different leaf at age 30 plus and learned something absolutely different. So if we go back to our stories, change is always possible. So I often go back to stories, Leena. When I work with young people, I go back to stories to show them hope, to show them how a Carl Gustav Jung at the age of 75 changed his entire theory, came to India and said, whatever I've done till now is crap. How a Sigmund Freud, who's known as the father of psychology, made a theory, and 20 years later, he himself, although his theory is propounded by everyone, 30 years later, at age of 80, he said, listen, I made a wrong theory. I better make another theory. It was meaningful. So change is always possible is something that I tell everyone. Otherwise, I would feel very, very disappointed that I have nothing more to learn in life with my gray hair. So I absolutely believe, and I have seen changes. I think what I'm trying to point out, and what neuroscience is pointing out, is that the 0 to 6 period was supposed to be silent. Nothing dramatic is happening because by 0 to 3, the children are expressing in the way that we are used to hearing. They can't express in language, but they're expressing, they're communicating, and there's a lot happening. So it's like saying, much like the video of experiences and brain architecture, that you won't be able to see the foundation of a house ever, because there's something built on top of it. But does that mean it's not important? Or the biggest tree that you see, you could never see the seed because it was inside the ground. But does that mean it is not important? Because that's where it all starts. So I think that's what we have found that the seed of it all and the foundation of it all is so much in the 0 to 3 and 0 to 6 that we should be paying a lot of importance to it right now, because that's what everything else will build on.
Thank you so much.
So I see some messages.
Ma'am, there is a lady, Dr. Sheetal Parekh. She has raised her hand. So may I request the participant to unmute herself?
Yes. Uh, that was fantastic. I wanted to ask that we saw the last video about the delayed gratification thing. And previously, when you were talking about then, if the child cries and he doesn't get the milk for a longer time. So this is where a individuality comes. One child may, perceive it differently, and the other child may perceive it differently. I mean, it can happen that if the child is attended after 2 minutes, maybe the child thinks that, okay, I'll get it. I just have to wait. And the other child may not perceive it that way and take it traumatically. That's possible, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there is never a singular variable, and the possibility of those connections are immense. It's actually mind-boggling if you sit down, the individuality possible in each of us. And therefore, when we make policies or when we are looking at influencing children in any way, it is so important to understand how each person or each child may respond differently and to look for those responses rather than expecting each child to react the same way. I think that's all, because it will unfold. A child's character, and even yours or mine, is still unfolding, isn't it? We're going to have new experiences. We're going to respond to them. So what are we teaching? Are we teaching this is how you respond, or are we teaching how to meet and embrace what's happening? So not what you have to do, but how can you embrace? So not what to think, but how to actually have the process of thinking. So more process oriented than this, because none of us can predict exactly what the perception and the circumstance of each one of us is going to be. You can't possibly do it. No one. I can't do it for myself, so I don't know if I can do it for anyone else.
Sorry. So do you say that the way Froebel or even Montessori says that you just leave the child, let it explore, that helps more because of that, because the individual aspect comes into picture, right?
And the problem solving comes into the picture, and the learning with meaning comes into the picture. Multisensory, using all senses, embodying myself, using my body, not just my brain. So the moment we start compartmentalizing, integration goes away. We are going against the grain of nature. Nature is saying integrate everything. All of you is present. We are saying, no, we will not let you use anything else. Hold your body. Sit down for 4 hours and only apply your visual and auditory. That's not going to work, because half of my attention is going to be on how am I going to hold my body now? So am I really learning what you are teaching me, or am I learning how to hold my body at that point in time and repeatedly making an effort to do that? And then I don't know if I'm going to manage. Some of us might, some of us won't. So I think it's the approach, and I always go back to meaningfulness. What is meaningful in a child? Because we want to go, ultimately, what does a child have to do, and what does 2020 taught us? What did we need? Did I need my doctor's degree, my engineering degree in the last 1 year, or did I need something else within myself? And this is not just about a disaster or whatever. It is about, did I need to know how to connect to people? Did I need to know how to connect to myself? Did I need to know how to make and create my own happiness? Did I need to know what kind of a purpose I had? Did I need to know how to be with myself and not get bored, and what to do with boredom? Because our children, the maximum questions I get, I'm bored. तो क्लास लगवा देते हैं बच्चे की. एक इसकी क्लास, एक उसकी क्लास, एक उसकी क्लास, और 5 क्लासेस लग गई बच्चे की. अब बच्चा सीख रहा है, बट क्यों नहीं बोर हो सकते? Why cannot I create my own interest? Because कितनी देर हम क्लास लगवाएंगे हर चीज की? How do I use my body? How do I use my mind to create interest, wonder, happiness, rather than in a structured environment? So I think those are questions that I often ask. I don't have the answers. I have many questions.
Yes, ma'am. I think your session is really wonderful in the sense like you are talking about the psychological aspect, the overall personality, and the basis for all these are the neuroscience aspect, that is the physiology, the biology behind it. So, a very good synchrony between genetics and environment that you're making a point, and I'm sure that our students of ECEP would love this because they are directly learning all these content in their course, but coming from you in a perspective which is evidence based and of course entertaining at the same time. I think the students are going to love your session and remember your session.
Brilliant.
Ma'am,
I had
yeah,
2 more minutes of some brainstorming and ideas about what each person can do,
right.
and
So,
then we can open for the rest of the questions. I think Manjushri is saying something.
Yes. Hi, Kavita. It's going amazing. And I want to put on record Dr. Leena Pujari, who asked you the first question. A big thanks to her because she's the one who recommended your name. Remember I told you in the first message, that's her. And she was like, you must have her. She's amazing. And I'm so glad, Leena. Your suggestion has been more than perfect. So thank you so much. Kavita, I have just one question which comes to my mind because of a couple of things that you said with regards to the concept of pruning. Now, if there is a traumatic experience that a child has had, is it reversible? Is it reversible? Is there something that can make that go away? Because if that correction has been made,
So a traumatic experience is never reversible. So you can't forget it. Yeah. However,
okay.
However, all of us have had traumatic experiences. So what's the hope? The hope is that ये एक connection बना है, लेकिन इसको embrace करने का. What did I do to respond to this traumatic experience? Is so different in each one of us and will be different as we proceed through life, because I might find my own peace and resilience and resolution, and those circuits will also get created. So the quicker I make the resolution, the quicker. So if I've had a traumatic experience and I've kept it to myself and my response to it has been a certain way, and somebody else that I told their response was a certain way, I will keep that. But if I find, for example, where does healing occur? So this is the concept of not what life has thrown at you, because you can't control that. The concept is, how do you receive it? What do you do with it? How have you responded to it? Is there a community that you know where there are 10 people who have responded to it in a different way, which can give you hope? Because that's where the collective comes in. I will get someone who's had a traumatic experience to speak to someone else who has had a traumatic experience, to another person, to another person. And then when they know that there are 10 different ways of responding to it, that also will get a connection. Because otherwise, you can't change history. So the partition happened, all those who were there at that point of time, can we change it for them? No, we can't. That connection? No, it can't. The earthquake happened, these are things we can't change. So you cannot forget a memory, but how you respond to it, what you do with it, is what resilience is about.
I think what's
and that also
to my mind, because
one of the
because you mentioned partition, coming to my mind is bhag milka bhag.
Yeah, and we work with children with, for example, the Salam Balak Trust. These are street children who've had adversity right from the beginning. They've run away from home, have been abandoned. So if we go with the theory that nothing can be done, but there have been such beautiful success stories of people who've risen from adversity. This is the power of the human brain. This is also neuroplasticity, to not let it impact the rest of the brain, to actually say that there is so there is enough evidence again to say that no one thing will define. There are many different variables. And if you connect those to each other, there is always a possibility that receiving something. So you've seen burn victims, you've seen people who have been born blind. How do they rise? Because it's adversity. It's how you embrace it that will develop that brain as well. Yeah. So hoping that's going to help. I did want that we talk a little bit about what each one of us can do. And I have another story to end with, but Just to also bring on something that's close to my heart, which is that in the Indian context, I do not think that socio-emotional learning is a new concept. I think in India, it is something that has always been there. We didn't call it socio-emotional learning, but each and every story that we have grown up with has a socio-emotional base, has always had it. What are some of those stories? Those stories are Jataka tales, those stories are Ramayana. What is Ramayana about? Is it about intellect? It is not about intellect. What is the central theme of the Ramayana? It is about family, it is about connecting, it is about ethics, it is about right over wrong, it is about staying loyal, it is about listening to your parents, it is about so many different things. You look at it from a point of view of describing it, you can call it, it has got many SEL messages. But the Ramlila is something we enact every year. Each one of the Indian stories, whether it is the Jataka tales, whether it is the Panchtantra, these are based in SEL concepts. So it is not about learning a new concept in India for any of the teachers or any of the parents. This is about rediscovering and unlearning some of the things that we are learning as educators sometimes. I often urge teachers and parents to go back to their own childhood stories, of the story of Gandhi who taught us ahimsa. What is that if not an SEL learning? What did he teach in all these stories that we talk about? They are about socio-emotional learning. Let's bring them back into children's mindscapes now, especially in this thing. So one of the teachers so I often do sessions like this in schools. One of the teachers came up with this idea, and when I met her about a month later, she told me, so I'm going to narrate what it was. She started a 5-minute morning ritual with her class of 25-30 children, where every day in the morning she would read out one act of kindness. Just read out for 3 minutes one act of kindness that somebody did to someone. After 15 to 20 days, the children started expecting that as the start to the day. So during the day, they would try and find one act of kindness to also narrate. She then made it, each child has to come and allocated a day and said, you just have to narrate one act of kindness that you guys did. You know what happened at the end of 2 months of this? Every child was being kind because they wanted to talk about it the next day. It took 3 minutes every day and an intention. At the end of 2 months, these children were looking out for acts to do to each other so that they could talk about them. This is what SEL education can also look like. And it took her 3 minutes every day and an intention. And this is coming from one of your fellow teachers. This is not me. She did this. Similarly, there's a story about, and this is a collective you can look up called Kindness Rocks. We did this last year for 100 days. We made 100 rocks. But the collective is about this young lady in South Africa who lost her parents in a car crash and was absolutely devastated, didn't know what to do, was absolutely lonely, and kept looking for signs and asking God and asking everyone, why did this happen to me? This was such an adverse event. I cannot make meaning out of it. Would go out on walks and keep looking for signs to say that something will have meaning for me. One day she picked up the rock, a random rock, which seemed to have a mark on it. And she felt very good and thought, this is a sign for me. It looked like the mark of a heart. And she felt very good about it. From there started her tryst, where she started painting. She used to pick up a random rock and she would write a message on it and leave it back for someone else to find. And she would do one every day. And slowly her neighbors started seeing that there was all these beautiful messages that they would find. They would take them home, and slowly they started realizing it's this lady who's writing it. And this has become for her one of her lives. It's now in 44 countries. It's called the Kindness Rocks Project. But it's beautiful. I've done it in my neighborhood. I've done it in our clinic. We've done it. It just a small message which says, you are loved, you matter. Or so imagine finding a rock like that and taking it home with you. That somewhere somebody in the world wrote this and I could be the one to possess it. And just that, And it gave me a sense of satisfaction making those rocks. My entire team did it with us. It was absolutely beautiful as a project as well. So these are just small community things that when you tell a child that you see them, I see you, somebody somewhere sees you, you matter, you exist. That sometimes as a message is good enough for their socio-emotional happiness. When I look, I am seen, and so I exist. So the most important thing I think we can teach our children, if nothing else, is no matter what their age, no matter what their ability, no matter what their qualities, that they're valued because they're there. So oftentimes people ask me this question. I'm going to end with a story because I like stories very much. So I'm going to stop the share and talk to you about this story that, again, when people ask me, what can one person do? What can I do? And I struggle with that dilemma that in such a big world with so many systems that are bigger than ours, curriculum that is defined for us, power that we don't have and do not feel, sense of agency that we don't have. And my answer comes from this story. It's called the starfish story. I don't know if some of you have heard it, but I'm going to narrate it.
Yes.
Close your eyes and listen to the story. One summer's morning, a little girl was walking along a long, winding beach. She came across a starfish that had been washed ashore and was now wriggling and drying up in the hot sun. She reached down, gently picked up the starfish by one of its 5 points and tossed it back into the sea. The little girl smiled and continued walking along the beach. But after a few steps, she found another starfish. It too was dying in the sun. She tossed that one back too. And as she started walking, each time she found one, she picked it up and tossed it back into the sea. She reached the top of a sand dune and came to a sudden stop. What she saw below startled her and amazed her. Stretching out in front of her were hundreds upon hundreds, maybe even thousands of dying starfish washed up on the beach. She got busy tossing back the starfish, but she never even noticed that a person had stopped to watch her. Soon, a small crowd had gathered. Some started pointing at the little girl and laughing. That little girl's crazy. I know, said another. Doesn't she know that every summer, thousands of starfish get washed up on the beach and die? It's just the way things are. There are so many starfish, she can't possibly make any difference. The little girl was still too busy tossing back starfish to notice these people. Finally, one man decided he had seen enough. He walked over to the little girl and he said, "Little girl, there are thousands of starfish washed up on the beach. You can't possibly hope to make any real difference. Why don't you give up and go play on the beach with the other children?" The little girl's smile suddenly vanished. She noticed for the first time the crowd of people and she realized that they had been laughing at her. And now they had fallen silent, awaiting her answer to the man's question. She was hot, she was tired, and she was now close to tears. She began to think that maybe he was right. Maybe they were all right. She had been tossing back starfish for what seemed like hours, and yet a carpet of starfish still covered the beach. How could she have possibly thought she could make a difference? Her arms fell limp at her sides, and the starfish she was holding fell back to the hot sand. She started to walk away. Then suddenly she stopped and turned around, reached back down, and picked up the starfish she had dropped. She swung back her arm and tossed the starfish as far as she possibly could. When it landed with a plop, she turned to the man and with a huge smile on her face, she said, "I made a difference to that one." And that's my answer to can you make a difference? And what can you do is something you can decide. There is a sequel to this story. The sequel is not by the original person, but the sequel is that a little boy comes along, stands there, and says, "I will too. I want to make a difference too." And then all the children of that village slowly start gathering. And in no time, the entire village has put all the starfish back into the sea. And many, many years later, this little boy who had joined her comes back with his daughter to the beach and brings her to the sand dune, where there's an entire row of people from the village throwing starfish back into the sea. And this little girl turns to him and says, "Dad, what is this?" He says, "Every year when the starfish come, this village now stands there as a ritual and throws them all back into the sea."
Wow.
This is the power of one. Thank you. I'm done and happy to take any questions.
Kavita ma'am, I wish to give one feedback from Bombay Teachers Training College. Looking after this course, early childhood education for last 17 years, 17, 18 years as a coordinator, I always had been feeling early childhood education teachers should be paid maximum, should be paid most on in this world, because they are the parents, they are the doctors. They need to have all types of skills, inclusive of everything, because they are molding the minds right in the beginning, right in the childhood. But
I completely agree.
But it is sad it is not looked after so well in India. I wish to know from you, which country looks after early childhood education so well and really pays to their teachers, so that we can
Don't know the answer, but I do know that Sweden is one country where I am aware that early childhood is really paid attention to, and Japan.
And
But
we
very
need
different cultures.
see, maybe individually we all could not do that, and together we all can. And thank you so much for Samantha Education bringing you all also insight in the process of early childhood education. And as Dr. Balani said right in the beginning, that we are looking after early childhood education well in Bombay Teachers Training College. Probably now at university level, we can enhance our courses, our curriculum, and can pay much attention to all these versatile skills which teachers they need to have at that pre-primary education level.
All the best.
Thank you, ma'am. It was really inspiring hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, there was one raised hand by Mr. Sandeep. I don't see now. I think he's on the Zoom chat, Zoom platform. So can you, sir, unmute yourself and put your question?
Yes, very good afternoon to everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Actually, at that time, I think due to the flow, you just asked me to put down my hand. So now I would like to ask the same question actually. Like, ma'am, we have been discussing about EQ. And as we all know, before this period, we used to discuss about like IQ. So IQ was given too much importance. And I am an educator, and you are neuro, like a scientist, we can say, or psychologist, one who knows neuroscience better than me. So you are not prejudiced. I am prejudiced because society and education expects something from me, and accordingly, learning outcomes are framed. So my question is, like today, like we have understood the importance of emotional quotient. As we know that intelligence and emotions that are intricately interconnected. So I would like to know that apart from the emotional and intelligence, there are some other intelligences are also there.
Yes. So
With the help of
there is no IQ or EQ.
Hello?
There are only multiple intelligences. So if you go by the integration concept
multiple
of
intelligences are
neuroscience,
there.
even EQ is not just EQ.
All right.
What we have talked about
So
in
that is what I wanted to
everything is integrated. So even the motoric, so the body quotient is also integrated. Body intelligence is also there. Sensory intelligence is also there. And
Okay.
intelligence in any human being is
Okay.
about integrating all of these, not compartmentalizing.
Okay, so whenever we are talking about any one intelligence, so we are integrately talking about that.
So not in the way
Is it
that
so?
EQ is being talked about sometimes in theory and IQ. These are all compartments that people have made. Actually, what neuroscience is now saying is things don't occur in compartments. So you can talk about it as EQ, but
Okay, so
EQ
it
is
is in
not
the
separate.
integrated form.
It is always integrated.
All right, all right.
So there is a new
Okay.
concept by
And so
Mel Levine.
new,
If you look at it, it's called multiple intelligences. If you look up the concept, so it is like, for example, it is
sure,
saying,
sure.
for example, Lata Mangeshkar ji जो हैं, उनके लिए आप EQ नहीं ढूंढते हैं, उनकी म्यूजिकल सेंस इतनी
हाँ,
अच्छी है ना. इसी तरीके से अगर आप धोनी साहब
yes.
से बात करेंगे तो आप उनकी मैथ्स की इक्वेशन नहीं पूछते हैं. But so some people can
Okay.
get really gifted in certain areas because they have mastered them. That doesn't mean that the other areas are not present in them.
Okay. So like as you said, neuroplasticity and learning, unlearning things that can be applied to understand this integrated concept, integrated multiple intelligence concept.
Yes,
absolutely. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, there are two questions in my mind, if you permit. May I put forth?
Sure.
Ma'am, you talked about brain development and then the connection between the other aspects. So, since Madam Leena mentioned that I am a feminist educator, if I'm not mistaken, I would also like to put myself as an educator with a feminist perspective or a feminist lens in the making, of course. From that angle, when I see and I educate the students, I would like to know from you, like, when there is a deviation in the sexual orientation of the children or the individual, does it relate to the brain development or is it genetic? Because this is a confusion which is there, which on uh, going through is not very clear. So, is the brain development or the neuroscience has any answers for this? And the second question is, ma'am, many students who are also parents, they always come up with ideas such as give supplements to the young child to enhance the brain development, or what we call as memory food. So, right from walnut to chocolates are being recommended. But what is of concern, because when I was my child was young, my pediatrician told that please stop all that supplementary so-called DHA containing food. So I will not name the brands here on this public platform, but I guess you might understand. So we stopped it. Other than the brain development, it all contributes to diabetes or unhealthy habits. So with relation to that, are there really any memory foods or food that enhances brain development of a young child? Thank you so much, ma'am.
So these are both contentious areas. I don't think that I have clear answers. So there are two parts to your. I'm going to take the second question first and then the first one. The second question is about, are there any external things that we can do to actually enhance your this thing? So natural foods of certain varieties can definitely add this thing. The supplements that people have made usually came from a place where there are certain children who have either aversion to certain foods, or their palate is restricted, or they have feeding difficulties or eating difficulties. In them, and for the first time for them, these supplements got made. However, the use of supplements sometimes is done in children who are otherwise eating normally as well, where it is the desire of the parent to enhance in a different way, and also there is some marketing being done like that. As far as I am aware as a doctor, there are no such foods that can increase brain memory, etc., unless there is a problem, and there is a problem in the child or in the adult or in the geriatric age group where there is deficiencies of certain sorts. Therefore you're giving the supplement in itself means that something is not enough inside, and therefore it is being supplemented to achieve the daily requirement. Having said that, there are certain foods that are there in Indian diets naturally, which are now being picked up by the West and being called superfoods. So haldi, for example, or garlic, for example, are being called superfoods. Yeah, so turmeric is now marketed as a capsule, and हम लोग हल्दी डालते ही डालते हैं, अजवाइन है, हल्दी है, so a lot of these herbs. Or in the olden days, च्यवनप्राश की बात करते थे कि ये तो रोज खाना ही है या 5 बादाम खाने हैं. These are not bad. These are good for the body and mind. But if the child is having healthy food and a variety, including, vegetables, grain, as well as fruit, as well as dals and lentils, we are fine. And a vegetarian diet is absolutely fine. There's no need to go towards a non-vegetarian diet if the culture is not of this thing. So only in the allopathic areas, these supplements are more touted. Yeah, but there are also Ayurvedic supplements. So I'm not an Ayurvedic practitioner. There are some good things you can take. I also take sometimes. I will take Chyawanprash sometimes, but these are not necessarily supplements. Coming to your other question, I don't know of any memory enhancing foods, but I do know memory enhancing exercises, and I do know that joy and meaningfulness definitely enhances memory. Coming to the other question, we don't know yet whether sexual orientation is genetic in nature or not. We don't know. Now, genes and brain, so the genetic component of your DNA will influence brain development. So these two are linked. But this is not known yet. However, what is known is that sexual orientation is not by will. It is not something that is determined by the child as they grow only by themselves. There is an actual biological component to it. Whether it is gender orientation, so I'm not sure if you're aware of gender fluidity as well, which is different from sexual orientation. Yeah, sexuality is more about the attraction to another and loving someone else. And gender is about whether I am a man, woman, or gender fluid in a non-binary component. Both these have a biological component, which is not in the control of the child. That much is known. Whether there is a genetic component is not yet known. There are no studies that I am aware of. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. It answers my question, and I think it educates all the listeners and viewers of this particular session. Thank you, ma'am. I don't think there are any more questions that we can find either on the chat or on the YouTube chat. So, with your permission, if we can now proceed towards conclusion. So, may I now invite our student, Diane, to propose a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. As quoted by Marcus Tullius Cicero, gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parents of all the others. Today, I, Ms. Diane Gonsalves, on behalf of Bombay Teachers Training College, would like to express my heartfelt thanks to each one who has been a part of this webinar session. In a special way, I thank our knowledgeable resource person, Dr. Kavita Arora, for being here with us and for imparting her valuable knowledge on the topic emotional intelligence and the early years of a child to all of us. Thank you, ma'am. We feel fortunate to have Samantha Education in association with KC College, Bombay Teachers Training College, and Atman Academy collaboratively organize this webinar series for us. Thank you to each and every member of these institutions for putting in relentless efforts towards making this webinar session so enlightening for all of us. Thank you, Dr. Bhagwan Balani, for your constant support and encouragement. I am grateful to Dr. Mandeep Kochar, Dr. Lubna Mansoori, and Dr. Neelu Verma for coordinating and organizing such a wonderful session for all of us. Thank you to the entire BTTC faculty. It is your encouragement and support that has led us closer to success. I would also like to express my gratitude to Dr. Rajiv Jha for moderating this session and for giving me the privilege to propose the vote of thanks. Thank you to all the volunteers who have worked relentlessly for the success of this webinar, namely Ms. Sharmeen Ansari and our technical team, Ms. Anju Konai and Ms. Aisha. It is your cooperation that has further helped this webinar run smoothly. Finally, My heartfelt thanks goes out to our lovely audience for always being so patient, attentive, and participative. Thank you for your involvement and participation that has also made this webinar session a success. While we now have our lunch break, I request everyone to kindly join back at 2 p.m. sharp for our next session by Ms. Rajashri Deshpande on the topic Stronger Communities Through Emotional Intelligence. Thank you.
Diane, I'm sorry, I just got a message from Rajashri. She will be coming in a bit late. She is shooting and she has her break at 2:30. So she'll be in by 2:20, 2:25. So you guys can take a little longer break and be here by 2:20. I just got a message from her. So we'll convene back at 2:20. Thank you so much, Kavita. Thank you
Thank
very
you so much, Kavita ma'am. Thank you, Diane.